Spark.N.Stride. Spark.N.Stride.
It's much.
Dennis, what's going on?
Good, man. Brothers,
Hey,
going on, man?
brother, welcome to Spark.N.Stride, Dennis. Gonna comment on your jersey, but we'll just leave it there. So, what's happening, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man.
Everything good? You have a good weekend?
Good weekend. You know, I'm getting married on October 15th, so I'm just getting ready for that. You know, the typical wedding stressors. So, but otherwise than that, everything's good, man.
Hey, man, congrats on
Thanks.
that, dude.
Thanks.
Congrats. How long have you been engaged?
So I've been engaged for about like a year, but I've been with my fiance for about a total of 6 years. 6 years.
Wow, man, that's a huge life event coming up.
Oh yeah. But you know, it's part of life, man. Like I look at it like my fiance actually posted something on her story. It was kind of along the lines of, we forget. So it's like we wish for times where we had to worry about these kind of first world problems. So I really can't complain about that.
What does a wedding cost right now?
Well, right now we're trying to keep everything under like $20K.
Okay.
Yeah, because my logic is I look at all that money we could spend. I'd rather just buy a new house. At that point. So, and also too, like I look at it like there's a lot of more. The most important thing is, the union and the celebration. So, and our close friends. So that's what's more important to me than like a fancy, extravagant like hall and banquet. It's gonna be nice, but like you don't have to spend $100,000 on a wedding for it to be nice.
No, I mean, listen, man, you could, but to each his own, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone. I mean, you got to get in kind of like where you're fitting in.
Yeah.
For us, it was a little different. So I was previously married. I got married young, when I joined the Air Force. And then my wife was also married earlier on. Believe it or not, man, like I got engaged to my wife as soon as I got back from Afghanistan. So this is like 2016. And life just kept getting in the way, man.
Yeah.
Just like we started to like kind of like plan the wedding, and it just something would come up. So like it was the first thing was like us moving out of the apartment in Manhattan and moving down to the shore full time. Then shortly after that, we got pregnant. So then it was like, okay, so now the wedding lo and behold, dude, like we didn't get married until last year, 2022. Dude, like we had every intention on getting things rolling, but for whatever reason, man, it was just always just something would come up.
Yeah.
And then it was a COVID.
Right.
And then it was the addition to our house. Man, it just kept getting away from us. But so, yeah, man, that the planning, I don't envy that like whatsoever. Yeah. What was funny though is we went through all these different ideas. Oh, we could do a hall, we could do this, plate per person, this kind of thing. Ultimately, we just went ahead with getting married in Puerto Rico. We have like friends of ours that are like in the hotel business and that kind of thing. There's a hotel that we stay at all the time while we're out there. It's the Marriott Courtyard in Isla Verde. We're real nice place, super close to the airport. So in any case, we end up having it there. And man, like I'm sure you're experiencing, right? Like you put one person's name on a piece of paper, you don't realize all the folks that are attached with that one name. So it's like, oh, wait, hold on a second. You're going to invite this person?
Right.
No. You got to invite this person. You got to invite their mother, their father. And then slowly but surely, it just starts to web out of control, which is what started with us. We went from, I want to say we were well over 100 people. And I'm just like, that just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Like the amount of money, I'm more logical kind of, So ultimately what we went with, and I pissed off a lot of people. Trust me.
No, yeah.
I pissed off a lot of people, but it got down to, I'm going to pick 5. You're going to pick 5. Pick whatever 5 you want, but I'm going with 5. You're going with 5. And let's see. So 5 really means 10, right? So 10 on her side, 10 on my side is 20, and a few give and take here and there, which is ultimately what we ended up doing. So, pissed off a lot of people. I'm sure. A lot of people upset, man. Like, we didn't get invited to your wedding, yada, yada. But ultimately, guess what? People forget about stuff. It's, water underneath the bridge, pretty much. You put it on Facebook. Everyone knows about it. It's Facebook official. You're done, dude.
No, absolutely. So. And I tell you what, I think it's also a lot of pressure. There's so many pressures. There's societal pressure, culture, right? Certain cultures, you have to have a big wedding. It's just it's a celebration. It's kind of the norm, the custom. And, you know, you're right. Like, even for us, like, I was putting names down, and I told my fiance, I told Miriam, I was like, I literally forget, like, I'm forgetting people. And it's not people that I hate or don't like. It's just, for some reason, it's slipping my mind that I forgot this one person. I know it's going to piss somebody off if I pick one person over the other. Another thing I factor in is, you know, what if I invite someone and the other person I invite don't necessarily get along? So now I have to worry about that with the seating, make sure they're sitting over here, make sure that person's sitting over there. But, you know, to your point, you're right. It's like, it's not about those people per se. It's about you and your partner.
100%.
And their union, you know.
100%.
So, and at the end of the day, it's just us. You know, it's like it's you and your partner. Those people who are coming to watch you celebrate, they're not going to be there for the good times and the bad times, you know. So they're there to celebrate you, essentially.
Dude, 100%. Here's the other thing, right? I think sometimes we get caught up in these like dilemmas or these first world problems.
Yeah.
You know, oh my God, I got to plan a wedding, thousands of dollars. Who do I invite? Right. That's a first world problem, right? But what happens when you don't just, what would happen if you just did not have the funds to even entertain these other folks, right? Let's just say, for Dennis, what if you only had $5,000 for this wedding? What would you do? You would just have to figure it out.
Yeah, you'd have to figure it out. But also, that's where the pressure comes in, right? Because someone's going to shame you for that. They're going to be like, right? That's how it goes. Like, oh, you're only spending $5,000 for your wedding. What are you, a cheapskate? You know, so.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so like I said, there's pressure from it. I look at it like, it doesn't matter what you do. Someone's always going to say it's not good enough.
Right.
Or how come you're not doing more? Or, you know, you're not spending in a certain dollar amount. That means you don't value the person. That's all. Like, you know, it's like shaming tactics, you know. So it's like there's always going to be somebody to say something negative about what you're doing in your life, and I'm not gonna lie. Depending on who says it, it could be detrimental to how you think, how you believe. But you know, once you get older and you realize, you know, those same people who are talking about you, or you know, saying why aren't you doing X, Y, Z, they're not even helping you. So it's not like you're helping me do this and you're like, oh, I'm only spending $5,000. You're just critiquing me on what I'm doing. You know?
No value added.
Yeah.
No value added. You know what I mean?
But I get it. It's hard, man, because like I said, we all deal with pressure. We even in the military, right? Like there's a burden of performance. You know, like we have to make rank. You know, we have to study for this exam. We have to qualify. We have to do X, Y, Z. And if you don't do that in a certain timeline, there is a low level of shame that comes with it, whether it's internalized or external, right? It's like, oh, how come you didn't pick up E5 yet? You've been in for 4 years. Or how come you didn't get this qualification? There's people under you who got qualified. So it's like there's always a burden of performance in anything we do.
Who's watching, right?
Right.
Who's watching, man? How'd you meet your wife? Or your wife to be? How'd you meet her?
So actually, I met her on a dating site. I met her on Bumble.
Okay.
And that was the first time I went on Bumble. And the reason I went on Bumble is because, you know, I was working, you know, I was going to school doing undergrad. I was like, you know what? I kind of want to settle down again. I'm tired of like just dating and going or whatever. I want to find, you know, my person and just kind of, you know, lock it in. And she was actually the first person I matched with on Bumble, surprisingly. And I was like, oh, okay. And then after that, it just kind of went from there. So she's my fiance is from Egypt originally. She's a 5th grade math teacher, and no, I love her. She's a good person. You know, she's a good person. She supports me. She just completed her doctorate program a little while ago.
Whoa!
Right. So now she's like, you have to call me doctor. I was like, let's slow down with that. You know, so
like in math.
Yeah, math. Yeah.
Whoa, that's even.
Yeah, she's smart. Yeah, I tell her anytime we go out, you gotta do the tip in your head because I don't do the numbers.
Yeah, no, I'm horrible at that.
Right.
Like I pass the bill. I'll pay and then I'll pass it over to my wife and she does the tip and everything. My wife is just.
Well, she actually taught me a good trick. I didn't know this until she taught me. She was Miriam told me whenever you get your bill the tip is always double the first digit. That's
Double
the tip.
double the first.
So if the bill is $60, you want to leave $12.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to explain
Double the
it.
first
Double
digit.
the first digit.
What I was doing was I was doubling the tax.
Okay, yeah, you could probably do that too. Yeah. See,
Right.
I'm not a math person,
Yeah,
so
because the tax is like what, like 8%.
right.
So if you double it, it's like 16%.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
yeah, that's. But I'm gonna try that one. The
Yeah, yeah.
double the first digit. Be like, tell my wife, hey, check this out. I got
Right,
this.
right,
Let me show
right.
you how you do this.
But yeah, man, like I said, there's always gonna be some kind of pressure, and it's hard too because, like I said, I think even with our military background, we always have that low level burden of performance, right? It's like, don't quit, complete the task, don't make excuses, right? Even if something's bothering you, don't make an excuse, you know. And I would say we're probably indoctrined that way. A lot of us, maybe even growing up in our environments, growing up in the inner city, you know, if you're an athlete, right? All those, even though they're kind of different, they're kind of similar in the sense of there's a low level of expectation for you. Like maybe you have to support your family, you know, maybe, you know, you're the first person in your family who's actually somewhat of a success outside of the family, you know, whether you went to school, you went to the military, you made rank, you're making more money maybe than your parents at this point. So there's always some level of burden performance, and sometimes you can get lost in that. You know, you can think, oh, well, I'm not doing enough, you know, or I should be doing more. Then we start comparing ourselves to others, right? It's like, well, Mach is doing this. You know, I started before him. I should be, you know, at a certain level. And we can't think that way, you know, because everyone has their own journey. Like what you had to do to get to the Air Force is completely different than what someone else had to do to get to the Air Force. There might be what do you call it, like a legacy, right? Maybe their father was a full board colonel, and now they're going to join the Air Force, as opposed to someone who's like, you know what, I'm from Elizabeth, I'm from Berkeley Heights, I'm from the Bronx, and I have no idea how I'm going to pay for college. I'm going to join the military.
Yeah, you know, when I was a recruiter, I got a chance to see all those different stories, right? Because I mean, it's just so repetitive. You're seeing this one person with a legacy background, or repetitive in the sense that, hey man, like I'm just down and out on my luck. Like my brother's in the Air Force, or my brother's in the Army, whatever it is. I need to change quickly this trajectory that I'm on because it's not in the right direction or whatever. So, and then it comes down to like the qualifications, right? Qualifications change year to year, every fiscal year to fiscal year. I'm not sure what they are currently for the Air Force, but I do know that this past fiscal year it was tough for the Air Force to make its annual recruiting number. I think the only other time that I don't know if they've missed, but I know one of the other times was when I joined in '99. In that year, I guess we were like in a surplus with the economy. Bill Clinton was in office, and just they weren't hitting the target number. So, but in terms of like numbers and stuff like that, like I've seen it where like things just get changed around, man. Like just because like they need to change. So someone will come in and be like, oh, we're gonna change the qualifying score to this, and we're gonna change this on the qualifications change like year to year for the most part. But back to what I was telling you in terms of like, you get a chance to see all these different stories of folks that come in, right? Like one of the first people I put in the Air Force, like her grandfather was in the Air Force, right? So there was already like this legacy. Well, my grandfather was in, I want to, come in. But again, the qualifications were different for clearly when he was coming in as to like what was going on in 2009, 2010 when I was doing it. It's just very different. Right. You know what I mean? One of the big things or the misconceptions at the time was folks would come in and they would think that they're going to leave to basic training tomorrow. And it's just like, no, it doesn't work that way. Like, here's what has to happen first. Here's the breakdown. You got to get qualified. You got to go take an academic exam, the ASVAB at the time, and then you got to do your medical. And now you're just hurry up and waiting, which is our term, right? You're waiting to leave to basic training. So what would happen is for like a recruiter, when these folks have made it all the way through like the medical portion and the academic portion, and they're qualified, like they have a job, they're just waiting to leave to basic training. Now you're required to meet with these folks monthly, at least once a month. Right. You got to get their height and their weight, make sure that their qualifications haven't changed. Now multiply that by like, I don't know, or, at one time I had like 40, 50 people. So I would have to meet with 50 people monthly. I'd have to break it down 25 in the earlier part of the month and then 25 towards the end of the month. Because there's just too many people because you're supposed to also speak to these folks and have some sort of a rapport with them and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, if it takes 6 to 8 months to get them into basic training, should anything change with this high school, young adult, young 20, should anything change with this person and they do not go to basic training, they do not leave. They put on too much weight, they get arrested, they have some speeding tickets, they mess up their credit, whatever happens within these 8 months that you're responsible for whatever, being a mentor to this person, a supervisor, it falls back on the recruiter. And dude, like that's like,
it's super stressful.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You want to talk about pressure.
Yeah.
Man, like you just, and I've mentioned it on here before, and I had a buddy of mine. He was also he was a Marine recruiter, and we just talk about what we reflect back on when we were in it and kind of like going through it, and we look back and like, dude, like, could you picture letting that level of stress get to you? But to your point, there's this level of pressure because you have to perform, and you have people watching, and there's numbers involved and all this kind of thing. I don't miss it at all. Much respect to all of the military recruiters out there right now. Just
that's a hard billet, man.
Going through it, man.
Yeah,
going through it. I had a young lady one time. I get her in. She's in the Air Force. She's gonna leave in in a few months. So now you start building this rapport. So she was in a long-term relationship with a guy. I never really I don't think I ever met the guy. But anyway, long story short, I get a call on like a Sunday night, probably like 10 o'clock at night. It's my recruiter phone. So I answer. It's the young lady. I'm not going to share her name. So this young lady literally just got beat up by her boyfriend. Oh, like she just got beat up, right? So she got beat up and she is locked in a closet in her apartment. This is the phone call that I get and when I tell you recruiters deal with all kind of stuff, dude, like, so I get this phone call. So I don't know what to do. She's getting ready to leave in like 2 weeks. So there's like this 2 week like window, right? So first thing on my mind is like, I got to get her to some kind of safety, right? So I'm like, hey, can you just grab your important papers? Like, don't even worry about clothes, makeup.
Right.
You could buy all that. Just your documents. You're going to need your documents, right? So I drive out to where she's living. It was somewhere out in like, I was out in like Amboy somewhere. It was like in the hood. It's dark, Sunday. Now, by the time I get out there now, it's like 11 o'clock at night. So I get her to sneak out of the apartment, get her stuff. I don't know where the guy is. So she sneaks out, gets into my car. So now I have to figure out where to take her. Where do I take her? Right? So anything involving a recruiter and an applicant, especially like opposite sex kind of thing, dude, that is the sure way to end your career.
Oh, sure. Oh, for sure.
Like,
for sure. Fraternization. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
dude, like, right. So like, what do I do? So, lo and behold, like I do let her stay at my apartment for like 3 days until I could figure out like what to do with her. You know what I mean? So, I had a female flight mate, and the female flight mate helped me out. Ultimately, the female flight mate lets her stay at her apartment until it's time for her to leave. We're good friends to this day. She's married. She has 2 kids, and she's thriving, right? Like, she's been in the Air Force over 10 years. But that night, I mean, I wasn't sure what to do. Like, what if I would have drove over there and like would have been confronted by the guy? God only knows what could have happened. You know what I mean? But being a recruiter is no joke, man.
No,
that's a tough job.
No, for real. And I think even you made a point about retention. Even now, retention is kind of low because we have a lot of guardsmen, recruiters on our campus, and they're telling even telling me like retention is low. And a big reason why retention low currently is the younger people. Well, there's a lot of variables, but they say the younger people aren't as patriotic as like our generation is. So they're kind of like, I don't want to, be involved in any kind of danger for this country as of today.
Right.
Another reason is because a lot of these younger people are making way more money, not even going to school, just whatever field they're working in. And they're looking at it like, well, why would I do that when I'm already making like 60K, 70K? So we started seeing a lot of the bonuses increasing, a lot of the incentives as far as, okay, because I remember when I joined, they only give you like 10,000 or like 15,000, something like that. Now they're getting 60,000, 50,000 with, specific rates, et cetera.
Yeah.
And even that is not working. Like offering $60,000 for a sign-on bonus isn't enough for these guys now because they're making so much money. So they're trying to find new ways to incentivize, and that's why you're seeing now a lot of podcasts, a lot of social media. We have a guardsman recruiter who has like 100,000 followers on TikTok, and she just uses that for like army recruiting. And she's 26. She just made staff sergeant, 26. She's young.
Wow.
But she's killing on TikTok right now. So, at that point, the Army's like, oh, roger that. Just keep doing it, So you're going to start seeing a lot more social media as influencers who are military, and that might even be like their position moving forward, right? Having a PR person, but just like for TikTok or Instagram, something like that.
I think that'd be interesting to see how that kind of like plays out, right? Just to see what comes of that. How do they utilize social media to because listen, when I was a recruiter, Facebook was very brand new. Literally, Dennis, 1 year, it's like, hey, you better not be interacting with applicants on Facebook. Like, okay. Then it went to, you need to be interacting with your applicants on Facebook. Oh, and by the way, your office, you have to register for a Facebook page for your recruiting office. So now there's like a whole social media thing part of it. Who runs that? Who is in charge of that social media page or outlet platform? The recruiter is. So it's interesting, man. I could only imagine like what comes of it. I never thought about that part though, like having a recruiter with enough following that they're an influencer. And
you'd be surprised. It makes sense.
It's wild,
right? Because
it's really, really wild if you think about it,
right?
Like,
and times are changing, right? So even unfortunately, the military has its customs and its core values, and it tries to stay as in line with the core values. But a lot of those core values are outdated, respectfully, right? Sometimes you got to adapt and overcome. The one thing the military preaches, sometimes it fails to do because it wants to stay in line with the core values. But the applicants are changing. The sense of honor, courage, and commitment may not necessarily be as strong as it was. Like in my era, like I'm the 9/11 era, so there's a lot of people who joined just because of 9/11. That was the sole purpose. 9/11. Oh, you attack my country, I'm joining. I remember when I went in, my recruiter, he texted me. He was like, I got guys who were in like 88 and got out, and they were like, yo, sign me back up. And they're like, sir, you're 60. Cut it out.
Yeah.
But they were ready. Like these guys were just ready to come back, So unfortunately, sometimes it takes tragedy for, people to get, riled up and have camaraderie. The same thing with Ukraine, right? It's one thing to be like, oh, I'm going to war, but it's one thing if someone's attacking where you're from. Like I always joke, Red Dawn would never happen in the United States. It would never happen. We're not just gonna sit here and just let you.
Hang on, Dennis. Hang on a second. Can you explain what Red Dawn is?
So for the listeners who might be familiar with Little Season, so there was an original, I believe it came in the 80s, but they made a reboot early 2000. But we'll just go based on the original. So Red Dawn was a story of North Korea and Russia basically invading the United States. Like they got past our satellites, they got past everything, and there was literally boots on the ground of Russian soldiers and North Korean soldiers taking over towns in the United States. So think of your local town in, we'll say where you're from right here currently. You see paratrooping Russians and North Koreans landing, kicking your homes, taking your stuff, attacking the police, and we're just overtaken.
So one part that I did not know that North Korea was in there. I always thought it was Russia.
I think the newer one had North Korea and Russia.
Okay.
But the original one was just Russia.
Right, yeah.
Correct.
So one of the coolest scenes in that movie is like these high school kids in high school, like they're daydreaming. Well, I think it's the girl. The girl's daydreaming. She's looking out the window, and all of a sudden you start seeing like people like paratrooping into the field.
Right.
And they're like, what? Like, what's going on out there? That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to your point, like imagine, you're saying that won't ever happen.
That would never happen.
Yeah,
here.
no.
Never. Like we're so indoctrined, we're not just going to let people do that to us. And that's what's kind of going on in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I like to think, I think Russia overplayed their hand because they probably thought, oh, I'm just going to go into a small country and just take over them like they did Crimea. But there's something about even someone breaking into your home. You're not just going to, you don't matter how many people are coming in. You're not going to let someone just come in and potentially harm you and your family. That's one thing about Americans. I'll give us credit. When our back's against the wall, that's kind of when we're like the most dangerous, you know? And
for sure. Yeah, man.
That's when the camaraderie comes to that point, you know? So it's just interesting to see like the whole dynamic with that.
I just think we're kind of like, whatever these other countries, if they're ever thinking something along those lines, I think it would be more like infrastructure based first. Right. But we're being light about this with the movie and stuff. America's too hood.
Yeah.
You're not about to come here,
especially Texas,
with no bullshit. Like
it's
Texas,
just forget about it.
Oh, get out of here, dude! Like, no. Yeah. No. There's some hood cats somewhere in this country. They're like, I wish they would. Right. Show up.
Yeah.
Pop out. Yeah. Like, I don't know, man. Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck on that end. Yeah. We just got too many pockets of like hood shit going on. Yeah. You're not about to, the cops can't even go into some of these neighborhoods. You think Russia's going to perish? Good luck.
Right.
Not happening.
No, but to your point, that's why you're seeing now, especially with infrastructure, I would say that's probably our biggest weakness now, the infrastructure, because we're so dependent on technology in 2023. The simplest inconvenience with the power grid will shut us down. I remember when Sandy happened. Remember when Sandy happened?
Yeah.
That was the closest like the apocalypse that you could probably see.
So I had just missed Sandy.
Okay.
Like literally missed it by like a few weeks. So I moved to Denver, Colorado, and I'm unpacking in Denver and I'm watching the TV, watching everything going on in New Jersey. I'm like, New York, New Jersey. I'm like, man, like I just missed that. Yeah, like people were like rationing like gas,
floodings, right? No power. You couldn't store food. And it's interesting to see how civilized people can become uncivilized once civilization kind of breaks down, unfortunately. You know, it's like we like to think we're civilized, but how civilized are we really when we have no power? You know, we have no heat, no AC, no access to gas. Like, unfortunately, their animal instincts come out as survival at that point.
Survival, yeah.
You know, people are being nasty. The people are stealing cans of gas, not carrying. So it's infrastructure. That'll be the real downfall, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of tech being boosted up. Even in our field of the military, Intel. A lot of people dismiss Intel because it's just whatever. Intel saves lives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an Intel guy, so I get it. You know, Intel saves lives. If you got the wrong Intel, that can either make or break the mission. You know, so I like to tell even the students at Rutgers, I tell all of my students, it sounds corny, but everything we learned in the military is keeping us alive today in 2022.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
You know, attention to detail, keep your head on a swivel, misinformation, OPSEC, all these things we got to pay attention to that we kind of take for granted because it's like, oh, we're not in a war zone, or we're not training, we're not in the field, but we're hit with misinformation every day. You know, we're dealing with people who may not have the best intentions for us, and they're just telling us things to kind of get our resources, or get close to us so they can manipulate us or do harm, whatever it is. Like we have to pay attention to what's going on in the world because times are changing, things are changing, so we got to be a little bit more cognitive of what's going on and how we receive information.
Yeah, no, like even to this day, right now, I have a bug out bag.
Yeah.
Like right now, I have a bug out bag.
And people, I tell you what, not to cut you off, they probably think you're crazy for that. They're probably like, oh, why do you have that?
Oh yeah.
Why do you have that? You don't need that.
My wife is the first one to call me crazy. Like she'll say it in Spanish, but it's the equivalent. Like there he goes again and trying to invent something new. But guess what? We have these drills. Like we drill like once a month. Should something happen, I always try to keep one of the cars filled with gas, at least one, completely filled. And she's like, why do you always? I'm like, dude, like God forbid something happens. If there's a storm that comes through here, we're gonna need to be able to charge our phones and kind of thing. Like you want to at least have one of the cars filled with gas. The other part of it, we had got some crazy winds like a few months ago over here. I mean, real crazy, to the point that the family's calling. The family's like, hey, like, where are you guys? We're like, we're having dinner. They're like, no, you have to get somewhere safe. You got to get somewhere low. So I don't have a basement. I have a crawl space, but we do have this area underneath the stairs where we keep for like Christmas storage. I had to like move all this stuff out, grab the bug out bag, and like we all went underneath the staircase inside this little cubby until the winds, like it was like knocking down houses and stuff like that. My daughter was like a little nervous, but in the bug out bag, I had MREs, meals ready to eat. I had water in there. I had a first aid kit. I had a crank radio. I had a flashlight. And then my wife's like, oh, like, it's kind of cool that you have that. I'm like, yeah, this is why we, when you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. You know what I mean? So, man, I want to ask you something. Dennis, you mentioned Rutgers. How did you get involved into like what you're doing now at Rutgers?
So, originally, when I got out the Navy in 2009, I want to say 2009, maybe early 2010. It was kind of like November, December.
Okay.
When I got out. So I got out and I told myself, I was like, okay, I'll just get a job. Honestly, I was kind of naive when I got out. I was like, oh, I'll just become a cop or something. I'll just apply, police department, they'll pick me up, whatever.
Right.
And I was applying to multiple police departments and I wasn't getting pretty much no hits back. Like
really?
I was
no love.
I was in, mind you, I'm a combat vet. I'm thinking, I'm good to go. Yeah. And the biggest drawback and feedback I heard back from any employer, not just law enforcement, was I have no degree. So in my head, I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, okay, I know I don't have a degree, but I have all these years of military experience. And that's when the switch went off where I was like, oh, well, I'm looking at myself as this 27-year-old service member who did all these accolades. They're looking at me like a 27-year-old guy with a high school diploma. So at that point, I was like, you know what? I have to go to school. I have to at least get a degree in something so I can compete with everyone else. So I ended up going to school for criminal justice originally. So I got my associates in criminal justice. And then when I went to switch schools to my 4-year school, I was actually going to go to Rutgers first, but then there was like a college fair at Middlesex County College. So it was Rutgers University and it was New Jersey City University. So I just happened to walk past the New Jersey City University first, and there was the lead chairs, I believe it was Dr. Zecca and it was also Dr. Krantz. And I believe they were both in law enforcement. They were both detectives in their respective cities. So I want to say one was like South Brunswick and the other one was maybe Freehold, something like that. I forget, it was a while ago.
Okay.
And, I was talking about something like, I was in the military for 8 years. I'm a combat vet. I have a security clearance. And they're like, oh, well, we have a national security degree program here. I was like, what is that? It's kind of like criminal justice, but essentially it's more of the intel side. So it's like risk management, introduction to intel. So basically it's more of the intel side of criminal justice, not just the, boots on the ground aspect. It's more of the intel backgrounds, risk management, things like that. I was like, oh, that's interesting to me.
And this is at Middlesex County?
Yeah, Middlesex County College, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but NJCU just happened, they had a fair there for the colleges. So all these colleges, like Rowan was there, all these colleges. I just happened to come across NJCU first. So when I was telling them my story, that I was military, they're like, well, with the national security degree, if you transfer over here, based on your military record and your JST, we'll give you 36 credits towards your degree. I was like, Roger that.
Yeah, where do I sign?
I didn't even no disrespect, no shade Rutgers, but I didn't even go to Rutgers because at that point I was like, they're giving me 36 credits towards my degree. And in my head, well, that's a year off my degree. That's one more year. The quicker I can start working. So that my whole mindset was hurry up, get this degree.
Right.
And then transfer. So in the meanwhile, while I was going to school, I was actually a work study at Middlesex County College. And the two coordinators, Paul Lazaro and Dave Bremer, they were also Army vets. So when I first started going to Middlesex, there was no veteran services at all. It was just some lady in the registrar. I had to give her my certificate of eligibility for my GI Bill benefits, and she just certified it. And I think my second semester, she told me, hey, you have to go to veteran services. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, there's no veteran services here. I've been here for like a year and a half. I've never heard of them. So they're like, oh, their office is around the corner. So they must have been transitioning in the time that I went to creating an actual office because I didn't know about it. So when I went there, that's when I met Paul and Dave. They kind of took me under their wing, and I was actually one of the first work studies at Middlesex County College for veteran services. So they actually taught me everything that they knew as far as like how to use a GI Bill, any VA educational benefits, any VA benefits as far as disability, the things they really don't teach us when we process out the military because, we don't learn that stuff until it's too late. So once I learned that, I actually got a job. So I graduated, got my degree, and I actually got a job at Middlesex County College because Paul and Dave went on to work for the VA. So I got the assistant coordinator position, and then they hired a new director who happened to be a retired Air Force officer. So I did that for a year, and then...
Wow. So hang on. So all of this stuff is just kind of like coming together for you. Just you're meeting one person, and you know what I think. I think that while you're saying all of this, what you're not describing at all is your attitude towards any of this. You're making it sound very easy. You're making it sound...
Oh, no, yeah, it wasn't easy. It was just,
Dennis, you're making it sound like, I just did this and this and this. But I could almost guarantee you there had to have been like a level of like resiliency and like your attitude. You had to have had a good attitude or a positive attitude towards what it was you were trying to accomplish. Because it doesn't come that easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. You're right. And I think the reason I think that way is because... like I said, we're in doctrine, right? Where I'm used to going into a new facility or a new building, having to learn some material, get it done, don't make excuses, right? That's part of our military training, just kind of bang it out, you know? And to your point, it wasn't easy, and it was so long ago, I feel like you're right, because I feel like at one point I was struggling. When I got out the military, I was like 27, 28. I had to go back to school, I'm horrible at math, so I had to get these remedial classes.
Which is why you're marrying a...
Right. That's why my wife's going to be a math major. So I have everything covered. All my bases are covered. Yeah. So Miriam, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
And, but it was difficult because, like I said, that and I want to circle back to the pressure, that pressure to perform, in my head, I was like, man, I've been on combat missions. I've rappelled out of helicopters. I've been to Iraq, all this cool stuff I did, and I can't even solve this basic math problem. And it's humbling, because I'm sitting there like, I can't figure out algebra. I can't do it. And that's where the mentors come in, Paul and Dave, the people at Veteran Services at the time who were assisting me because they kind of went through that process, And then one thing I like about the military is we do have that camaraderie and no one gets left behind. And I think that's something we can all agree on, regardless of the branch, regardless of the era. We don't leave anybody behind. So if we see our fellow airmen, our fellow sailor, Marine, soldier struggling, we're going to make sure we circle back and, get them squared away. And I did have a lot of help as far as, staying on track, them letting me know, hey, man, we went through the same process as you. We get it. And I think that's what I use today when I'm being here at Rutgers. I have to remember that at one point, that was me getting out of the military, having no idea what to do, being frustrated, being upset because there is a title to it. You're an E5, you're an E6, you're a sergeant, you're a petty officer. You can even be a lieutenant or a captain and you get out the military. And for so many years, that was your identity.
Yeah.
You know? Like you were the tech sergeant, you know, you were the first sergeant for years, and now you're just Mach.
Yep.
You know, so
Yep.
it's kind of humbling. So, and we're so used to being in charge and taking charge of things, you almost feel helpless in a situation because you're starting over. And that's where that support system comes in. That's where your family comes in. That's where your wife comes in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's where your siblings, your battle buddies. That's where they all come in to kind of bring you to where you need to be. And we have to remember that even though we are starting over, life isn't over, right? The military was just one chapter of our life that we completed, and this new chapter, whether it's education, whether it's a new field, whether it's media, podcasts, right? This new section of our life is just one component that's going to make us better. I had to think about my military training as a catalyst to make me dedicated to what I have to do in my real life as a civilian, you know, everything we learned, you know, and we're going to fall, you know, we're going to fail at things. Like I remember I failed classes. I'm not going to lie. I failed classes. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I ended up graduating with a 3.9 with my bachelor's.
Wow.
Right. And I never thought in my head, someone who failed classes like math, I had to take math like 2 or 3 times because I couldn't get it. Everything else I was getting A's and B's in, but the math just wasn't hitting. And I had to tell myself, I was like, yo, what am I doing wrong that I'm not getting this math? And it was humbling. I was like, yo, I had to get tutoring. I have to get tutoring. I had this 19-year-old girl tutoring me in the library on Wednesdays when I was dead tired, but I was like, you know what, I have to do something. So one thing, like I said, I'm grateful for the military is they give us a foundation not to fail. You know, even if we think we can't do it, we just keep, you know, pushing forward and we do it, and eventually you'll get it. So I have to use that kind of mindset and mantra for my students and what I do every day to make sure that, yeah, I get it, man. You're 30, you got a wife and kid, you're not making the money you used to, you're going to school, it's engineering, it's stressful, I get it. But you have resources now to help you, and also you're not doing it alone.
Yeah, that's one of the things I miss the most. I wouldn't say the most, but there's a lot of things I miss. But being in a training environment with a group of folks, whether it be like a basic training or an academic, like a sit down kind of a academy type of thing, instinctively, what is the message that's brought down to us is together, teamwork. Get it, you know, at no point in none of those schoolings, none of those environments is it like you're going to do this by yourself. You can't ask for help. It's never been like that. And what's cool about that is as you take that with you into like the operational military, a lot of your friends and your folks, like you guys will figure things out like no one will leave until you got it figured out.
Right.
And everyone has a strength. Everyone has a weakness too, right? So it's kind of cool seeing how, you know, when you're learning about group dynamics, right? Like the storming, performing, right? Like that whole aspect. I'm not sure how the Navy does it.
We have something similar.
Right. Like, so it's just these different group dynamics, these different elements to group dynamics, knowing that when you all come together, it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be some storming, which is like folks, you know, maybe like bickering or trying to get their idea across. And then there's a norming part of it where you're kind of like gelling, kind of like trying to figure out, and then a performing. And there's another initial step that I'm drawing a blank on. But ultimately, coming together as a team, getting things accomplished. Now you transition into a different part of your life, whether you're going to be a full-time student or you're going to be a full-time student and a father and a husband and hold down a full-time job. Trying to figure out that transition cannot be easy. For me, when I got off of active duty in 2016 and went into the reserve component, that first year was really hard for me. Just really, really tough. And if it wasn't for us having my daughter, I was a stay-at-home dad for 3 years, but having my daughter and being a stay-at-home dad gave me, I felt, purpose. So fast forward current day, as I make my official exit and retirement, you know, out of the Air Force, I didn't want to repeat that again. Repeat the the struggle in the transition, being unsure, trying to find purpose or passion or anything like that. And that's how a lot of this came up. Spark.N.Stride. Well, what is Spark.N.Stride? Okay. What does it look like? What does it sound like? Ultimately, what are you trying to accomplish, right? So as a first sergeant, being charged with the health, morale, and welfare of all unit members, I was like, well, I've been doing this for such a long time. I think this is the area of focus that I want to continue to move forward with. And that's how kind of like Spark.N.Stride.
No, and like I said, but that's also terrifying, right? Like it's terrifying to say, you know what, I'm going to start my own podcast in a world of podcasts, right? So, but to your point, you have to start from somewhere. You know, you have to start with that first guest, that first listener. That one listener turns into 10. That 10 turns into 20. You share the post. Oh, wow, who's this guy? Let me follow him. You know, so you have to start from somewhere. I think it's terrifying to start because you're comparing yourself to other people, right? You're comparing yourself to someone who might have like 10,000 followers or 20, but what? At one point they had one.
Yep.
You know, so you have to start from somewhere.
You know what's been really interesting about this entire journey with Spark.N.Stride as a podcast and ultimately as a production company, the amount of folks who have been reaching out to me. Dude, like clearly I know how they're getting a hold of me is social media, but you don't think to yourself like, oh man, like 14,000 people watch this one video. Like, holy smokes, that's, in my mind, that's a lot. Maybe to someone listening, they're like, oh, 14,000, who cares? You know, I'm getting millions of views. Well, that's mind blowing in itself to me.
Right.
But just to have this, believe it or not, the naysayers have been the closest people to me for some odd reason. Like the closest ones, and I don't know if it's just candid conversation or trying to, I don't know what it is, to be quite honest. The positive reinforcement, there's pockets of folks that are very close to me that reciprocate this positivity. But to be quite honest, it's folks that I don't even know, man. People direct messaging me, hey man, love this. Thank you. Needed to hear that. Hey, like, how did you get started? Just all this kind of like inquisitive, like positivity, you know what I mean? Which I was not prepared for that.
No, I tell you what, they don't teach you how to be successful, you know, like how to deal with the aftermath of the success, right? So, and I tell you what, I think there's two reasons for the naysayers. This is my personal opinion. So, I also have my own radio show that I do at Rutgers called the Veterans Corner, and it's funny because you telling your story, it's relatable, and that's the one thing, it's relatable, right? If there's a lot of people who have things to say, but they don't have a voice, and you just happen to be that voice, and it's like, oh damn, you know what Mach is saying, that's right, because I experienced that, so it's relatable. I like what you're doing. I'm gonna share this and show to other people who might be like-minded like me. So to your point, it's the reason you're getting all that positive feedback because the content you're producing is relatable in some way, some form or fashion that hits home to somebody who's listening to that. Maybe they had a similar experience. Maybe you remind them of someone. Maybe you remind them of an uncle, a brother, a father. You know, maybe you remind them of someone that mentored them in the military. You know, it's all relatable. So you're getting that positive feedback from people who relate to your story, who relate to what you're saying. Another reason for the naysayers is because, to my point earlier, there's always going to be that one or two people who say you can't do something because they can't do it themselves. So just because, or who does he think he is with his podcast? Sir, you would never even start. You're outside the club complaining about you can't even get in the club, you know? So at that point, right, it's like you're complaining from the outside, oh, how come he's doing X, Y, Z when the person who's actually doing it isn't saying anything? So it's a double-edged sword. You're going to have those people who are, I don't want to say envious, but there is a low level of envy because, you know, they want to do what you can do. They just can't for whatever reason, whether it's fear, whether it's lack of resources, whether it's personality, even talking, right? Like public speaking isn't popular for most people because most people don't like talking, especially don't like talking about themselves or a topic because they feel whether it's shamed or, someone's going to critique them. But especially in this business, when it comes to podcasts and media, you have to have some level of thick skin because you can have the best episode ever, 1 million views. Someone's going to hit that not like button. Not like.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of, I don't like that.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, that's that guy, right? I don't like that. So you have to focus on the positives. You have to focus on the people that you're reaching. I look at it like life kind of humbles us and life shows us what we're really doing. Even if it is 2,000, guess what? It could be 0. That would be more detrimental to me than like, oh, I only got 2,000. Some people put a lot of content and they get like 10 views, 20, because, it doesn't look a certain way. What I like what you do, and I can say this from a media standpoint, is there's 3 things that really catch me with your content. 1, the visuals. We live in a visual age where if it's eye popping, it's catching. Like your videos or clips are very catching. They're very trendy. It catches my eye. So that's one thing. The relatability, the content you put out as far as the stories, the relatable people you have on the show, that's another draw. And the other draw is your military background. So between military, the content you put out that's military surrounded, and the visuals, that's why people watch. You could have someone.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. And like I said, you could have someone who puts out a similar podcast, similar content, and they have no personality, and it just kind of just sinks. So you have to have some kind of niche and or personality to do these kind of things because, like I said, public speaking is for everybody. That people get terrified. Like how it is. You interview somebody, they're like, the lights, they're nervous, but you do it after a while, just like the military. After a while, you keep doing it. It's normal.
Yeah, man. For some reason, I don't know what it is, man. Like, so when folks sit down, and for the most part, these are, listen, these are folks that are articulate, smart, have a background, have companies or nonprofit, whatever it is. For some reason, when the lights and cameras go on, folks like freeze up a little bit, and I'm just like, hey, like,
and you know why?
Relax.
We circle back to that pressure, right? The pressure to perform.
Yes.
Right? I have to make sure I don't sound stupid. I have to
time.
make sure I'm looking in the camera correctly. I have to make sure I don't say anything that might implicate me later. I have students that went on to do other things. Like I have a student of mine who literally works for FanDuel. Like she graduated, she works for FanDuel right now. I would love to have her on the show, but I can't have her on my show because she can't talk about FanDuel because it's a gambling thing. So she can't really talk about it, right? So I can have her on, but also she has to be mindful. Yes, I would like to go on Dennis's show, but I also can't put my job at jeopardy for talking about something that may or may not get flagged because FanDuel doesn't want me to do it. So that's also part of it, right? So you have to kind of be mindful of your audience, and you also have to be mindful of your personal life, right? Like you don't want to just, like I said, we live in an age of misinformation, and people just say things for the sake of saying them. So we have to make sure that we're responsible enough to protect ourselves and then also whatever entity we represent. Like I tell people all the time, like even for me, even with my social media and my Instagram, I can't post certain things. And the reason I can't post certain things is because I'm a representation of the university. Not to brag, but if you Google my name, Dennis Penny, Rutgers is the first thing that pops up at that point. Like Rutgers pops up, the office pops up. So I have to be mindful of what I say, how I treat people in public, because it's not, even when I say something, right? Because if I say something negative, it's not going to be like, oh, Dennis says something. It's going to be this guy who works at Rutgers University said XYZ. And now Rutgers must think the way he thinks because he works for them. So I really have to be mindful of what I say and what I do. Even with my Instagram, the Rutgers New Brunswick verified page, they follow me. I have no idea who's watching that page. It could be a vice chancellor. It could be a grad student.
Big time.
So I can't post reckless things on my page. I can't say, oh, the university is stupid. I can't do these things because to your point, you never know who's watching. So we all have someone that we represent, but also I'm also representing myself, right? Like I don't want to say anything that maybe taken out of context. But like I said, we live in a world where I can say, oh, well, I don't think, well, you're wrong because da-da-da, dislike. Not even with the media thing, you have to have some level of toughness, and you have to know that no matter what you do, no matter how perfect your podcast is, how great the visuals are, the guests, there's always going to be that small percentage of people who just say, you know what, this guy sucks. I don't like his stuff. Or, man, he's corny. I could do a better podcast. But meanwhile, you're not even doing anything. You're just complaining about it. You're watching me complaining about it, right?
You know what's funny, man, is like this whole entire thing it's really wild because it's how organic it's just been. Just there's so many. Pick anything in here. Pick anything in terms of like the content, and I could go into like this whole organic way like it started, which is kind of cool because, in my opinion, it only goes up, right? It should go up if you're consistent and you have some sort of a blueprint that you're putting together, right? Because I don't have the blueprint. I honestly don't. I have what I've done thus far. And again, it's been organic. It's been growing on its own. So in terms of like visuals and all that kind of thing, man, that's been a little bit of hard work, a little bit of fortitude, some resiliency.
It's paying off, man.
It's just constant. And I'm so open to criticism too. I think one of the things that, especially, being in the military for such a long time, one of the things that a good leader, I think, can do is two things. They can delegate, but they can also take constructive feedback, right? One of the things that I would do whenever I would apply for any kind of like high-level position or just any position, I would always get a letter of recommendation from one of my troops. Always. Yeah. So like if it was like, let's just say they say, hey, like you have an option for like optional 3 letters of recommendation. I would get my immediate supervisor and I'd get someone who's supervised me in the past, something like that. But I would always get one from a lower ranking troop within my organization.
That's actually smart because you can see from their perspective how they view you, especially with leadership, and we can laugh about this now, but I think we've both experienced bad leadership in our careers, in our military careers, and
guaranteed,
and to your point, we can take it one of two ways. We can either say, this is the type of leader I want to be, or this is the type of leader I don't want to be. And I even welcome the bad leadership experience because I tell myself when I'm in a leadership position, that's how not to be. We grew up in the era of just knife hand and do what I say. That's it. No questions, just do what I say. Now we have to be mindful of people's personalities, their situations, where they come from, their culture. We have to be a little bit more tolerant, and those things also make up a good leader. A good leader just doesn't do what I say because I say so. A good leader is inspiring, your subordinates to follow you. They trust you with their lives. So being inspirational is better to me than being fearful.
I think I think in line with what you just mentioned in terms of like the era that we came up in, right now, if you can explain to your troops, this younger generation of military member, if you can explain to them or get them to understand the why, you have their buy-in. Yeah. It's what we came from, where there's no explaining why. I don't have time for that. This is what I need you to do it, go, right? Here, it just takes like a little bit more effort to get them to understand the why. If they understand the why, dude, like, and I think that's the struggle, right? Because you have this one generation of service member who's been in for a while, like you and I have been in, is like, no. You do what I tell you to do, right? I don't have time to explain to you. You have to trust in what I'm telling you to do. That's it. And you need that. Right? Like on the battlefield, right, front line, I don't have time to explain to you the why, right? So place and time, that also goes into it. But ultimately, man, if you can really, if they can understand, if they can formulate what it is you're expressing to them and them have their why, I think that's right now like a big disconnect between the generations of service member.
Yeah, definitely. Even the standards have changed. Like I remember when I was in, like tattoos are really like taboo. Like they were like above the elbow, better not show. Now full sleeved. You'll see commanders with like neck tattoos and just fully sleeve now. So the times are changing. And to your point, we do have to be a little bit more tolerant of the younger generation. Like I always tell myself, you know, I don't want to be that old guy who's complaining about young people. But at one point, I was the young person being complained about by the old people, you know. So we have to take the meat and spit out the bones. You know, we have to realize, yes, times are changing. This is a different level of service member that we're engaging with. And they have a whole slew of problems that we never had to deal with, you know, even with the internet. The internet really wasn't big when I was in the military. Like I think we had AOL at the time, like AOL chat or AIM or something like that, but it wasn't really like online posting photos and doing all that stuff. I rarely have any photos of myself in the military outside the country, realistically. Like stateside, yes, but like outside the country, I have no photos of myself like out of the country. Not just because, you know, obviously OPSEC, but just because we didn't think to be taking selfies in the desert. Oh, yeah. That was like a thing for us, you know?
I think too, right? Like, to your point, right? Selfie, yeah, no, we weren't doing that.
Yeah, we weren't taking, yeah. The only photo we probably took is a command photo or like a group photo with our unit. And that was like a very basic, like we're standing in front of the helo or we're standing in front of the commander or something, just taking a photo.
Yeah.
Like, you fast forward now, like they're taking selfies in the Hummer, you know, they're
video,
they're on the field, you know, they're recording, like
editing right on their phone.
Right on their phone, you know, and I'm imagine like Sergeant Major, like, what are you taking pictures of this stuff? Like, what are you?
So you know, but Dennis, think about this for a second. So every generation that has come before us, right? So like when you think about like the folks that were in World War I, coming into World War II, the you know, the Roaring '20s, the Great Depression, you know, coming into the '40s, every generation has had some kind of critique about the new generation. It's always been like that, right? We have our own, you know, perspective on things, but I always tell folks like the natural order. I always throw that in there. You cannot run away from the natural order of things. It's just the way it is, man. Like you get married, chances are you're gonna have a kid. That's just like the natural order of things. Maybe you don't. Maybe you get married at an older, you know, I'm just saying like the natural order of things. You drive your car, you probably have to put gas in it or charge it. That's just the natural order. Like these are the things that happen, right? So when I think about like generations, the natural order is that you're going to have to move out of the way as a leader.
Yeah.
That is the natural order.
That's
so
hard to do.
Like you're it's hard to do, right? You have to have enough trust in yourself that you've done the best job you could possibly do. You've mentored, you've trained, you've led by example, right? You've done all these things because ultimately you have to move out of the way for this next generation. So when folks, you know, like, I don't like the word like snowflake and that kind of thing. Like, I just think it's demeaning, like whatever. Call it what you want. The natural order is that these folks, they're going to have to step up to the plate at some point. Hopefully we don't see a World War III or anything remotely close to that. However, it's this next generation that's going to have to answer the call. That's the natural order of things. It's just the way it is, man.
No, definitely. And I tell you what, there's only one generation that can complain and not get any negative feedback, and that's the World War II guys. They're allowed to complain about anything.
Yep.
Those are the only guys. That's it. Everyone else, we got to pick some pushback. So.
There's a gentleman who lives in my town. He served in World War II. I'm trying to get in contact with him. He's older. I would like to see if he would be interested in doing the podcast.
No, definitely. You know,
I just have so many questions.
I don't care what anybody says. That's the greatest generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hands down. We I remember maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we went to there was a Veterans Day parade like in the New Brunswick area, and we met some World War II guys, and we were talking to the guy. He was two older gentlemen, and we went back to not lions, the elks. So we went to the elks, and he was telling a story. He goes, yeah, you know, I was at the Battle of the Bulge, and you know, I was at D-Day. You know, I didn't really do anything you guys didn't do. I was like, sir, stop it. Okay, you were at D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge, and for people who don't know, D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge were probably the two most impactful / momentum war battles in World War II.
Turning points.
A turning point. Like if we didn't win those, it was over. And he was at both of them and survived in the Air Corps. So
wow.
But he was just so humble about it. He goes, yeah. You know, he acted like he just went to AIT and that's it. Like, no, sir, you are him. You were that guy.
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
And fast forward now, we're taking selfies in the helo. You know, so to your point, I think that's where the disconnect is. But you're right. To a point, we have to move over, and we have to trust that. Yes, we're training our replacements, so it will behoove you to make sure you do the right trainings, make sure you make them the leader that you want to be. You know.
So when I was at the Senior Non-Commissioned Officer Academy, which is in Maxwell Air Force Base down in Alabama, one of the things that we did in the class was that they had us watch 3 or 4 different recruitment videos. So we watched an American recruitment video, we watched a Chinese recruitment video, a Russian recruitment video, and I believe it was North Korean recruitment video. Brother, like, you're watching these videos, you know, they're on YouTube. You can watch them. The snippet that we watched for the U.S. recruitment video compared to the other countries, night and day.
Oh, I'm sure.
Night and day.
Straight propaganda. Yeah.
Night and day. Like these guys, their videos are like, we're coming for you.
Yeah.
Like, we're coming and we're coming strong. Like, there ain't no. I don't want to use a curse word or anything, but like there ain't no bitch in our body. Like we're coming. And then the American one was, you know, cartoonish. Right. You know, 2 mothers. Right. This girl wants to go off and, you know, she's writing poetry in her room and she needs an adventure and it's all cartoon. Right. And then you have like missiles, you know, like from these other countries. Like, no, like we're for real.
Yeah. That's another thing too. If for the listeners who may not have been outside the continental United States, there's a reason people think Americans are the way we are, because we kind of romanticize like America, right? It's like beef and cowboys, essentially, right? It's like, you know, we get to go on trips, we're doing all this fun stuff. We pretty much get to do what we want within reason, without breaking the law. We can even talk bad about our own government and nothing really happens, right? But you go to some of these other countries, like especially like Saudi Arabia, you can't even like say anything negative. Like anything negative, you have to carry yourself a certain way. They're a lot more strict, you know, the authoritarian type, you know, dictatorship type leadership, you know. And we forget in America, and don't get me wrong, America is not great by any means, but we're not perfect. But also, I can't think of another first world country I would want to live in that has the same rights, you know. And yes, it's not perfect, but we're at least allowed to argue and debate for our rights and not just be held under a thumb, you know. And those other countries, they use that. I would even say some of these other countries like China and North Korea, they're a little bit jealous of us because they don't want their people acting like how we act, you know, as far as like having free thought, you know, thinking for ourselves, you know, not to question stuff, just follow orders, do what we say, and then, you know, don't worry about this other stuff. So
even like in like with like China, in regards to like TikTok, even the algorithm that we see in the US, the algorithm that we see in the US is completely different from their algorithm. Our kids, you know, this young generation, they're just being fed like, you know, they're just being fed, what would be the right word? Just, I don't know, non-educational
like garbage,
type garbage, right? Where in China, like everything's like instructional, and you know, there's a lot has to do with like profession and, you know, just enlightened content. Where Our stuff is just,
Right.
different.
And that's part of it too, right? America is part of freedom. The keyword freedom, the freedom of choice to do what you want. But sometimes that freedom comes with a negative back end portion of it, right? Yes, you can choose to do whatever you want to do. That can also include you doing nothing. Doing nothing is also a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're just okay with doing nothing, the competition is okay with that because that's one less person to take a spot from them. So, certain people benefit from us ingesting certain, things, certain media. They want to think a certain way. So I'm the type of person I like to double check and triple check what I'm researching and what I'm looking to. If I hear something, I have to kind of fact check because I'm just so used to just hearing nonsense. I just want to make sure. And I tell you what, you don't necessarily even have to agree with everything you hear. Just because you don't like what you're hearing doesn't mean it's not true. And I think we need to realize that even in our own lives, right? Like we can hear something, I don't believe that. And then it's like, man, that's kind of true. So even like there's aliens now, right? It was like, oh my God, there's aliens. Sir, I've been knowing about that.
Yeah.
Y'all just figuring it out now. Like they've been slowly like kind of feed us like, hey, how'd you feel if this happened? Even with movies, right? Like we have all these things coming out, these media. But also it's weird because no one cares that there's aliens. So it's like
but aliens are real, right?
Right.
Are they real?
I believe they're real.
I think they're real.
The universe is too big.
It's too big
for
it's
us
too big.
to be just us.
Too big.
But then
have you like you've been out on patrol like on ships and that kind of thing. Have you ever seen anything in the night sky?
It's gonna sound crazy, man. Because every time I tell a story, everyone's like, "Yo, you're full of it." But I tell you, I remember it specifically. Okay.
Oh shit!
I remember specifically. So
Spark.N.Stride premiere right here.
I tell you what. So and actually, one of my friends he commented on the clip. Like I served with Dennis. It was actually him who was with me, and he can confirm this. So me and him were both on watch. And so we're on the flight line, okay? So normally on the flight line, it's nighttime. You're used to seeing helicopters and planes going by. So you don't think anything of it.
So this is like an aircraft carrier?
Yeah.
Not like a destroyer or anything.
No. It's like aircraft carrier. Like we're just doing patrols, right?
Yeah.
And we're doing watch. And,
dude, I got questions. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No worries. And we're doing watch. And then so he sees this light and we're thinking, oh, one of the helos is coming back because it's just hovering. Like one of the helos is coming back. But we didn't hear anything. We see the lights of the tail lights of the helo just like there. So we're like, oh, is the helo landing? And we didn't hear anything like any helos are landing. So
and that's a distinctive sound,
right? You could tell
for you, right? Like you know,
right? You could tell when a helicopter is approaching. Like even now,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
The helicopter is approaching. I'm lying. We were on the carrier. We were on base, but we're just on the flight line on base. We're doing gate watch.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We're doing gate watch, and we saw the lights for the helo. And Kano, my friend Kano, he was like, "Yo, that's weird. How come the helo's not landing?" I was like, "Yes, I don't know." So the helo was just there, and then it went maybe like 75 meters to the left, and we were like, "Yo, why is this not making any sound? Like what? Like this is." I was like, you're seeing this, right? Like the helo's not making any sound, just there. And then it just like zipped away and just went fast. But it didn't go fast like a helicopter. It went fast like a jet. So basically it was, and we don't have, in the Marine, so the Marines have forgot what aircraft they have, the Harriet, the one that like hovers. But even if that was the case, there was no sound. So we were just so freaked out because it was hovering like a helicopter, but it flew in the opposite direction like it was a jet. And to this day, no one believes us what we saw. I was like, and I kind of wish we had phones back then and cameras to record, but it was just something. And now looking back, I was like, maybe it wasn't an alien. Maybe it was just an aircraft they were testing, but it was just so weird because there was no sound. I don't know if you ever saw like a helo at night. You can tell an aircraft landing because you could tell by the lights, like the tail lights and everything. And it just threw us off because there was no sound. It was just quiet, and it just flew off very fast. And to this day, we have no idea. And that always freaked me out. And I was like, yo, that has to be something because...
Where were you stationed when
so I was in San Diego, the Navy SEAL base.
So this was in San Diego?
In San Diego, right. We were on the
like
Navy SEAL
year?
base.
What year?
This was probably like 2003, maybe 2004,
Really?
2005.
Wow.
Yeah, at nighttime, and also it was like 02. So yeah, we could have been tired, but my whole thing was there was no sound. That's what really threw me off. Like the lights didn't throw me off. The velocity of how fast it went really didn't throw me off. It was just there was no sound. And so for a helicopter to be that close and have no sound, even the stealth helicopters, which we have, they make a sound. Like you'll feel the rotor wash, you'll feel the wind. Like it was just weird to me. So we can never explain that. Whoa. And everyone thinks I'm crazy when I say that, but my friend Kano, the one who commented on the post, he was with me. He'll confirm. He's like, we never figured out to this day what that was, and we always thought like that was just weird to us. So I hardly believe in that, but also I believe that there's certain things that happen that we can't explain. Like I'm sure looking back, maybe it was like a test or something. I don't think drones are really big back in 2003, but even now, like we see stuff in it. It could be a drone, it could be stuff for a movie. But I believe in aliens. There's no way. There's no way.
Yeah, I think whatever extraterrestrial aliens, whatever, I think they've been around for a while. I don't know. I just
scouting us. That's all.
I don't know, man. Yeah, like it's pretty interesting, dude. Yeah. It's pretty. I've never had like an experience with anything like at night or. I tell you where I thought I would see stuff, but I really didn't, was when I was like stationed in Iraq. When I was in Iraq in 2003, I would think like, oh man, like, you know, because the night sky just looks so different there. Right. You know what I mean? Because there's like, you know, you're in the middle of this base, is in the middle of somewhere, and there's like very little ambient light, so you could see. You know what I mean? Something really wild that I saw in Iraq that to this day, I saw like it must have been like a 5 or 10 minute like lightning storm. I don't know if you've ever seen anything like that. Just the craziest thing. Just like off in the distance, there's just this rapid lightning just going off. And it's just like the way it's like lighting up the sky. It's like in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? And you're just kind of like watching it like, man, like, what is that? You know? I was asking my buddy, like, you ever seen anything like that? He's like, yeah, no. It was like a lightning storm, whatever.
Yeah, man. There's always stuff that happens to us that we just can't explain, and you know, it's just interesting. I always say the cool stuff happens when like no one's around. Yeah. Unfortunately, like all the cool stuff, you see it, never saw it. You know? So, but yeah, man, there's so many secrets we have. Like I said, I'm sure. I always tell my civilian friends, I was like, even with the military, right? There's so many things that we can't even talk about that we experienced. If you knew what we were really doing or what we stopped from happening or prevented, you would lose your mind. Like how close to home it was, and every day, like even with our own FBI and our intel, NSA, they probably stopped so many attacks that we have no idea about, and we're just like living our regular lives.
Yeah, everybody's in their bubble, just kind of
like we were this close to like it all being over, and we'll never know just because they did such a good job. You know, I believe there's an explanation for everything, but I also believe that science can prove something true until it's not. You know, at one point, everyone thought the world was flat until they realized it wasn't.
So it's not flat,
right?
Okay, all right.
To my knowledge, it's not. To my knowledge, it's not. But yeah, I think some people they want an explanation for things, and if they can't explain it, it terrifies them. Like I personally think there's a reason. If aliens are here or have been here, there's a reason they haven't like interacted with us. Maybe they think these guys are so primitive, we'll come back in another 200 years. They can't even get along with each other. Let's come back in 200 years, or you know, let's leave some little things here and there and see if they pick up on it or try to like reverse engineer. But I'd be ignorant to think that we don't have some tabs on something. We're just trying to wait, or maybe they made contact already and we're just dealing with them. We have no idea. They could be just here dealing with us and we don't even know. Like we'll never know. You know, so I'm not getting paranoid, but
no, man, it's gotta be interesting if that ever, because little by little, more things are coming out within the government. They're releasing more and more things. But What if we wake up one day and they're like, hey man, like I don't even know what you would call them, like these ETs came down and we're gonna work on something together. I don't know. Like
I like your positive outlook on that, but I'd be more concerned that humans wouldn't be able to accept something more different. Right? Like some humans can't even accept a skin color, let alone if you're green. So that would, and then I also think, and this is me just going down a rabbit hole, but what if that would trigger, like, yo, you know what? These guys are not good people. Right? So I think about stuff like that. So, but I hope it's the latter. I hope it's they want to come and help and, not exploit. Yeah. But I always think about stuff like that. Like, we can't even get along with each other half the time. How are we going to get along with, like, people from another planet that don't speak our language and look like us,
Yeah, that would be. But what if they did look like us?
That'll be.
I don't know. Like, right? Like, we're assuming that they don't look like us.
Right.
But what if?
Right.
I don't know. Like, what if they've just been here and. What if we're like all descendants of some like alien planet? We just haven't been activated yet.
That's believable. It's possible.
Maybe there's like something that we got to go through and they can activate us.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know, man. Like,
listen, anything's possible, man. Anything is possible. Like if you would have told me you'd be able to order anything on a computer and have it sent to your house like 15 years ago, I would have called you a liar.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way. I can just order anything I want on a computer and it'll come to my house in a couple of days. And now, fast forward, we have aliens, and no one's really shocked by it, which is interesting to me.
Yeah,
like, no one's really shocked by it. Like,
no one's geeking out about it. We're like, oh, okay.
Don't worry about the student loans. Like, hey, man, I got student loans, man. We're about aliens.
Dennis, the student loan is the only one that you can't forgive.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Listen, Uncle Sam need their cut, man. They need their cut.
Dude,
I know.
That's crazy.
I know. Yeah.
You could go bankrupt on any other loan.
Yeah.
Not your student loan.
Uncle Sam needs
They're
their
gonna
cut.
go to the grave and get it.
Yeah. So,
man,
I tell you what, my dad told me this when I was young. I never believed him. He was like, the older you get, the more conservative you get. I was like, I don't believe you. Now, anytime something happens, I'm like, damn, man, I can see why people do like tax fraud.
Yeah,
I don't condone it, but it's like we're spending so much money on all this other stuff, and you're still taxing us, and it's like,
or like not so much even the fraud, but like figuring out the loopholes,
right?
Because that's another thing.
Yeah.
Like if you understand like tax loopholes and this kind.
Listen, I'm gonna tell you how taxes work in a nutshell for the listeners. This is how taxes work, okay? So the government is like, you owe us money, and we're like, how much? The government's like, we're not gonna tell you. You gotta figure it out yourself, right? And then we're like, okay, well, what if we get the wrong amount? Then you go to jail. That's basically how it works. Pay us money. This is how much, figure out how much you owe. If it's not the correct amount, we're going to either tax you more or you go to jail. In a nutshell. And we're not telling you how we're spending the money. Maybe. So I think I read this thing, and I think that's why you see a lot of people now getting more financially literate. Like my parents are immigrants. Like financial literacy wasn't like a big thing. It was more like survival. Mm-hmm. And now that I'm older,
I think that's for like a lot of people.
Right. It's for a lot of us. It's for most of us, And I think now that I'm older, I'm like, damn, I even think about how much money I blew in the military. Just like buying dumb stuff, nothing to show for it. And now you're seeing all these financial literacy stuff where it's saying, well, hey, well, you can manage your money. You can manage your money this way. You can do X, Y, Z. I found out that if you get $70,000 in stock profit, you're taxed at a lesser rate than if you made $70,000 at your day job. So we'll say like if you make $70K at your day job, they'll tax you 20%. But if you made $70K in the stocks in 1 year, you only get taxed like 10%.
Mm. Oh yeah, so
it's like wow. I was like, wait a minute. So it's like,
and that's what I'm getting at, like learning the loopholes, dude. Like there's just so much. I think for the most part, like there should be curriculum in school for this.
They're not gonna do that. Because you know why? Because they teach us how to be workers.
Oh.
Why would they teach us financial literacy? They teach us how to think about everything we learn in school is teaching us how to be a worker. Come on time. You're in school from 9 to 3. You get a little 30-minute lunch break. do all these assignments. If you don't do the assignments the right way, something bad's gonna happen to you. Something bad's gonna happen. Either you fail or you don't go to the next grade. They're not gonna teach you how to balance a checkbook. They're not gonna teach you, how to get into stocks. They're not gonna teach you all these other things. It's literally just to teach you how to be a worker. The only real way you'll learn about finances if you go to college and go to the business school or learn finance, which is extra. So the business school degree costs more than the labor studies degree or the liberal arts degree. But with the business degree, finance, you're going to recoup that money because, you paid $80K for your degree, but more than likely you're going to get a job in finance or some kind of money field that is worth $80K or more. So the return on investment is a lot better. Speaking from someone who works at a college, right? That's what it is. It's like the degrees that make the most money cost more, but you could still pay $80,000 in college and get a liberal arts degree and not make the same as an engineer. And you guys are paying for the same thing. So it's literally to teach you how to be a worker. That's why a lot of these entrepreneurs and things like that, they're not really like college people. No, don't be wrong. I'm a big component of college. I believe education is key. You learn, but now, especially with the economy and student loans and everything, you're seeing a lot more people kind of like shy away from education because they feel like there's no value in it for them. But there is value in education. But even with colleges, it's a business.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
College is a business. So
I think one of the things that like folks, I don't know that everyone sees it this way, but one of the things that I see or the positive aspects of college that I see is the network part of it.
Exactly. Right.
Right. You graduate high school, if you don't go to college or community school, whatever, let's just say you want to go directly into like working, or there's a part of you building on your network where you miss out on. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because, for instance, let's just say you get like a decent job, I don't know, out of high school, maybe you work for your mom or dad or whatever the case is. There's a part of your network there's a potential to add on to your network that's not happening. Where I think that when you go off to school, of course, there's all these other aspects to it, right? Like the educational, the academia, all that. But the network part of it, when you're interacting with all these other, because you don't know what folks are gonna go on to do next, right? So I think also with the military, I think that's also a benefit as well, that you're kind of like, you're building onto your network of what's already been established. What do you have so far? I think once you leave, for the most part, you leave after 4 years, or maybe you go to undergrad or whatever the case is, but you leave and don't get me wrong, maybe you have folks that are not interested in networking or they're introvert or whatever the case is, but there is a large majority of folks that are leaving school with a huge network, especially with like social media, right? They have all these folks, and now there's this. They're staying in touch, and they're figuring out who's going off where and who's working where and who's going to law school, whatever. There's a whole network that you build upon. I think that sometimes folks kind of like miss that part.
No, yeah, definitely, and I think college isn't the end all be all for education. You can learn a trade. You can HVAC, all these hard skills that were big maybe 20 years ago, and there was like a small window from like maybe like the 90s, like early 2000s, where like people didn't care about like trade, right? Like, oh, you're a plumber, who cares? Go to school. But now the playing field is a little bit different now, because even with education, right, it has a cap. Because I remember at one point when I was younger, a bachelor's was a thing to have, and like you maybe get a master's. Now at this point, pretty much everyone has a master's degree. So if everyone has a master's degree, a bachelor's degree is like the new associate's degree. It's like, oh, okay, well, if a bachelor's, big whoop, everyone has a bachelor's at this point, Everyone has a bachelor's at this point. So now to compete, you have to either get like a master's degree and or like a doctorate or something like that, which is more money, right? Because the doctorates and master's degrees aren't cheap. They're probably like $20K, another $30K.
Easily. On
top of the $40K you probably have from undergrad, just to get a $10K pay raise at your job or a new position. So the return on investment, depending on who you are, could either, I think what's happening is, I think people are realizing like, well, I don't necessarily have to do all this schooling and education to either make money or, live a good life. You can learn a trade, you can podcast, media. There's so many different YouTube, right? YouTube's popping now. So you can have all these avenues to make income, which necessarily doesn't have to deal with education. But there is a still niche for that. Like we do need education. We do need to learn things. We do need to be educated, because I personally believe the more educated the society is, the better all will be overall. So I just wish there was a way for more people to afford college aside from the military. The military is a great tool to go to college. I'd even say more people are joining the military now just to go to college than ever before, especially if you're in the National Guard, right? You get the Guard waiver, they pay your tuition. Before it was just, honor, courage, and commitment. I love my country. Now it's like, damn, my parents can afford to send me to school, Air Force.
Yep. Yeah.
At that point,
Yeah. I that's how I got all my schooling done, was while I was in, which was great. I mean, I didn't have the whole experience of like living at the university and that kind of thing, but I had something super duper close to it, which is that, I'm living overseas,
right.
I'm traveling around, and I go to school at night with other military folks. I wouldn't change it for anything.
No,
in the
yeah,
world.
you still got the experience, but and I sound like a Scrooge, but essentially, college is supposed to be about getting whatever specific education or certificate you need to get a good job. Like that was the whole premise of college in the first place. Like I had to do this program, go to school, and then I complete it, and then now I can get a good job to support my family and or who else, right? But now it looks like going to school just shows that you're a good worker, right? It shows that you can show up someplace for 4 years, complete these tasks, and then continue on.
I think also too, man, with that, I think we instinctively think that because someone went away to school or completed school or even has like a doctorate degree, you equate that with the person being intelligent. Which is not the case.
That's not the case.
It's not the case.
Yeah, it's not the case.
Dude, I can't tell you how many people I've met in the military, outside the military, with all this education, but they're just not. They're on a different like frequency almost. You know what I mean?
Well, they say there's a I forgot the exact term, but there's different variables for where that is. You have book smarts and you have street smarts. Okay. Coming from the inner city, coming from a city environment, you're probably more street smart than you are book smart. As opposed to maybe someone who grew up in the suburbs. Not saying people in the suburbs can't be street smart, but growing up in an environment where survival and growing up in an environment where you have a choice of doing a multiple of things, you don't have that same fire, that same passion under you. So I believe street smarts and book smarts is completely different. There's a lot of people who are book smart that have no common sense, and they say common sense is common. It's not that common, and I think there's some correlation between people who are book smart and them following the rules to a T, where life doesn't really affect them, right? So I'll give you an example. So we'll say you have someone who's very analytical. They're like, okay, 1 + 1 is 2. That's it. Okay. Or, point A to point C. That's it. But they think very linear, but life happens, right? So it's like, I want to go to school. This is me getting a good job. This is me going to school. Oh, I had a kid. Okay, now I got to stop. Oh, wait. I got laid off. Oh, wait. My mom got sick. Oh, wait, my sister or brother are having legal issues. So all these life experiences happening to us, kind of, what next, that stop us from completing our tasks. But for some people, they've had a linear path their whole life. So they're like, whoa, how come you can't go to school? I was able to go to school. Well, guess what, bro? I grew up in Brooklyn, and to a single mom who didn't have that that resource to send me to school. So
yeah, we didn't have that.
We didn't have that, right? So guess what? I either had to join the military, play a sport or unfortunately sell drugs or something nefarious to support my family, as opposed to you who both your parents, were in your life. They had both stable jobs. They have, you had a house. You had resources in your community to pay for college or get loans that you'd be able to pay back. So they're looking at it like, well, I was able to do this. How come you couldn't do it? But they didn't experience the life that you had or the trials you had to go through, the tribulations that you had to go through to get to where you're at. I always think it's funny when people tell us that, oh, you were able to go to school because of the military. You're lucky. I wouldn't call it luck. I didn't win like a lottery and say, hey, I had to earn that. Some of us had to almost die to go to college, So I wouldn't call that luck, but they see it as lucky because we don't have to pay for school necessarily, but we paid in other ways, right?
You don't know how many times I had to correct people for that exact statement. Exact statement. Like, oh, you get, no, I don't get anything.
Right.
I earned this.
Right.
I earned this. And here's why. Like, yeah. Many times I've had to really, get people to.
Right.
Yeah. People think.
And it's almost triggering, right? Because I don't want to say it's triggering because they just don't know. And when people say ignorant is like a negative term, but ignorant just means not knowing, right? They're just ignorant to the fact that what we had to go through for the government to pay for our school. So sometimes you have to have that compassion and kind of forgive them. So to your point, I kind of correct them. Hey, I wasn't lucky. I didn't win a lottery. Say, hey, here's 36 months to go to school. I had to earn this blood, sweat, tears, broken bones, almost dying to go to school. That's not luck. And that's why I said some people live a different life and they're just confused that, oh, how come you couldn't do X, Y, Z? Like they don't get it. Like they never had to experience that. It's kind of like a foreign concept to them. Like, oh, wait, what do you mean you have to worry about the lights being cut off? I don't understand. Like, well, some people have to live that life. Well, what do you mean you couldn't have dinner sometimes? That happens.
That happens.
That happens, So, and they never experienced that, so it's kind of like a foreign concept to them that they never had to experience. The same way, like we'll never know what women go through with their period and their cramps. We'll never know.
Yep.
The only thing I know is it sucks for you and it makes you irritable. But I can't tell you, oh, it's not that bad because I've never experienced that. Like I've had a cramp in my leg, like a Charlie horse, but for me to tell you, oh, like your stomach cramps or whatever, that's disingenuous because I've never experienced that. So I would come from a place of ignorance, just telling you to just get over it or just lay down, right? So it's the same concept. Like they don't see the blood, sweat, tears, the time away from our family, the friends we've lost, dealing with that, right? Like they don't think about that. They think about like, oh, you just got to go to school and not have to pay for it.
Yeah, that's such a simplistic way of looking at it, right? Like, yeah. Oh, Uncle Sam got you covered.
Right.
Like, well, no, hang on a second. Like, no.
Right.
What made you join the Navy?
So my situation was a little bit unique. So originally I was supposed to go to the Pennsylvania Culinary Cooking School. So when I was a senior in high school, the Home News. I don't know if you guys remember the Home News. That's a long time ago. So the Home News, I think it was like a New Jersey paper. It's kind of like the Star Ledger.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was like a cooking contest in Middlesex County College. So they were looking for high school students to make a dish from scratch and present it, in the contest. So there was maybe like 20 of us, and I placed I think I was number 2. I definitely didn't win. I was like number 2. So I placed number 2 at the whole contest, and I made lasagna from scratch. My mom taught me how to make this lasagna. I made it from scratch.
You made the noodles and everything?
Not from scratch. Like as a 17-year-old kid, I made it myself. Like I
didn't
didn't buy it. Yeah, I prepared it.
I thought you meant the noodles.
Oh, I wish I was that good. No,
like the flour and the.
I bought the noodles. I bought the sauce, but I made the recipe from scratch. As far as I prepared it myself, I cut it up and everything.
Nice.
And I won second place. And the Pennsylvania Culinary Cooking School just happened to be there. They're like, hey, we want to offer you a scholarship. We love what you did. I was on the Home News. I took a picture and everything. About 2 weeks later, I was involved in an incident where I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, and I got arrested, and they found drugs on me, basically. So They weren't mine. I got in trouble, and luckily my father was in law enforcement. And
Hold on. Where were you, like, walking, driving?
I was driving.
Like,
I was driving.
You're driving.
I was driving.
So
Yeah,
you're driving.
I got pulled over by the police.
You by yourself?
I was with friends of friends in my car. Like, I knew them, but I didn't know them. Like we were going somewhere.
Associates.
Associates.
You're giving somebody a ride.
Right.
Okay.
Associates. And I knew one of the guys, but he knew the other guys. So
Got it.
It was
Okay.
more like an associate. They weren't like my close friends or anything.
Got it. So there's people in your car.
Right. There's people in my car.
You get pulled over.
Get pulled over. Everyone in my car just runs out.
Whoa.
They just run out. They book it. They're out
Whoa.
of here. Yeah. They just jet. And then so at that point, like, I'm screwed. Because at that point in my head, I was like, yo, they ran out for a reason. So when the cops searched me, they found some drugs in my car. And I was like, yo, I'm done. So
What kind of drugs did they find?
they found weed in my car. Yeah. They found weed in my car. And they also found some ammunition in my car.
Okay.
No gun, just like ammunition.
Got it.
So at that point, weed.
I was going to tell you, I was like, reflecting back on it now, before you mentioned the ammunition,
Yeah.
but I was like, weed?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
people don't understand. Some 20 years ago,
That
your
was-
life
it
was over.
That's it.
Over.
For the smallest amount. Yeah.
Like, now you can go
right.
and buy whatever you want to buy at the dispensary and
Right.
this. No, dude, like 20 years ago, we were screwed.
Right. Literally screwed. Yeah.
yeah.
So it was over for me. So luckily my father was in law enforcement. I was an athlete at the time in high school. I got good grades. So luckily my counselor, I remember his name, Dr. Clifford. He actually went to my court case. He spoke for me. He's like, yo, this kid, great in school, never been in trouble before. I've never been in trouble to that point. Never been in trouble. And they were like, he was literally like, yo, wrong place, wrong time. So between that and my father vouching for me because he was in law enforcement, the judge gave me PTI, which is called pre-trial intervention. So basically, if you've never been in trouble before, they give you like PTI. And he said, if the judge said, if you can find a branch of the military to take you, we can use that in lieu of your service for time served, because they're going to send me to jail anyway. Because by the time my court date happened, I would have been 18. They're looking to send me to jail at that point.
Wow.
So I went to the recruiting office on Route 18, right there in East Brunswick. I went to the Air Force. They said absolutely not. The Army, absolutely not. Coast Guard, absolutely not. My last Marines, absolutely not. So everyone was just like, I was radioactive. They didn't want to touch me. They didn't want anything to do with me because I had a pending case. And this was prior to 9/11 because so they were just like, nah, you got to have like a clean record. So I went to a Navy office and my eyes were like watering. I'll never forget. It was Petty Officer Jimenez, Puerto Rican dude. I was like, yo, if you do not take me, I'm going to jail. Straight up. Like, I'm going to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Like, it's over for me. So he looked at me. He was like, I got you, bro. Signed a waiver. Got me in the Navy. I was like, thank God. So that's how I ended up getting to the Navy. And then at the time.
That's almost unheard of, though.
Yeah, it's almost unheard of.
Because, so the fact that you were able to get into the Navy with a waiver, dude, like, that's.
And coming from a recruiter, that's like, yeah, right? So, they signed a waiver for me to get into the Navy, so I got in, and then I picked my rate. So I picked to be a rescue swimmer. So that's what I picked to be, a rescue swimmer.
Dennis, real quick. So this was 99 that all of this is happening?
Yeah, this is like 2000, like
early 2000?
2000, yeah.
Okay.
So this is like early 2000s, like right before 9/11. So by the time I finished all of my training, and I finished SEER school. So SEER school is search. Damn, I had it last time. So search, extraction, rescue and evade. Okay. Any person who's going to any kind of like aircraft, whether you're a pilot, whether you're air crew,
you
have to go through that training. So basically, if you get caught, you know what to do, what not to do. So as soon as I finished SEER school, 9/11 happened. So they're like, guess what, bro? You're going to Iraq at that point. So I went from dodging jail, to go right to like a war, right?
Whoa.
And I was stationed on the USS Constellation, the Connie, and we were actually part of the first invasion to like Baghdad and everything, like in 2003. So that's when I actually got to Iraq in 2003, and I did that I was deployed for 9 months, and then I came back. So one of my pilots, he had a training. He was at a training squadron in San Diego at the SEAL base, and he was like, "Yo, you wanna come over to Coronado?" I was like, "Roger that, sir. I'll be right there." And then I did my last 4 years in the Navy at Coronado, being an instructor on the SEAL base.
Wow.
So it's interesting to see how like your life can kind of change by like one simple mistake.
Yep.
And it's humbling because I even tell people like I shouldn't be talking to you right now. Like I should be in jail somewhere, like a repeat offender, because it only takes one time. And when I tell people my story, they're like, "Well, that was the first time you got in trouble." Like I was like, they don't care. They do not care.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the first time I did anything. They do not care. At that point, I had my hand in the cookie jar at that point, you know, and it's really humbling because I think about, you know, everything I've been through, even with that. And then at the time, right, also after that, I got into the Navy. My girlfriend got pregnant with my son. So I was like, oh, I gotta marry her because that's the right thing to do, you know?
Now, did you find out you were pregnant after you were in the, like, before you left to the Navy, or how did that work? Like,
So basically, I was in the delayed entry program.
when you found out?
Right, when I found
Okay.
out. Right. So
All
it was
right.
basically everything happened within like, it seems so long ago, but everything happened within like, it feels like weeks. So it was probably like months. So from the time that I got in trouble till I got the waiver for the Navy, till I found out I was having my son, that was all within like 6 to 7 months. It seemed so quick. Everything was just like rapid, you know? And then going from, and that's why I say like sometimes the pressure, right? It's going from like, okay, I dodged one bullet to like, damn, I gotta do this, to damn, this is happening. So it's kind of like all this happening to me by age of 19, right? Like I'm getting hit with all this life experience. That's why people think I'm older than what I really am, because I feel like I lived like a 50-year-old man's life within my 40-year lifespan, you know, as far as like what I had to do. And I don't regret anything because it kind of shaped me to the man I am today. And I try to think that I was giving an opportunity for redemption, and I can't squander that opportunity, you know, because my family depends on me. You know, I don't want to embarrass my parents, you know, my mom, my dad, you know. Also, I want my son to have someone to look up to, you know. So, you know, having kids really does change your perspective on life and how you see your life. You know, I always joke and say, like, when you have kids, your life is over. I don't mean like your life is over, like it's really over. I mean, like, your life is no longer yours. You know, like, someone else depends on you. Not even your wife. Like, your kid depends on you. You know, like, your wife will be okay, but your daughter, your son, they need you. They need your guidance. They need your support, you know. They depend on you for everything. They look to you like you're their hero. So you have to make sure that you set a good example for them. And that was a turning point for me where it's kind of like, you know what, like I got to take this a little bit more seriously. Like having my son, you know, getting in trouble, you know, having, navigating the military scheme and everything, you know, so everything, it's a very humbling experience. But like I said, I wouldn't change it for the world, you know. I like to think that stopped me from doing something really, really stupid. You know, maybe me getting in trouble at 17 was the reason that I'm here now. Because if I didn't get in trouble then, I just would have did something way worse.
Yeah, who knows what would have happened,
Right.
right? Like maybe
I would have caught up with that wrong crowd over something way more serious, and then now I'm really like in the ringer. So that's pretty much why I did it. So you're Air Force, so how come you didn't join the Navy? One of the best branches.
I don't think I would have made it in the Navy, man. Nah, I'll tell you why I didn't join. I almost joined the Navy, almost. So that's actually a good question. Then is why I didn't join the Navy. So growing up in Brooklyn, I'm chasing tail, and there's this girl that I'm like behind all the time. Wherever she goes, I'm trying to be there. So she tells me that that to come with her, that her recruiter, because she was joining the Navy, that her recruiter was gonna take. It wasn't like a tour. I just think that he had access to a van. He was a Navy recruiter. He's like, screw it, we're gonna go down to Virginia. We're gonna go to Norfolk and show you guys. Long story short, it's like a early day. Like I'm talking about, we leave Brooklyn probably like 5 or 6 in the morning. By 9 a.m. we're down at like Norfolk down there, and we get a tour of what I don't know if it was a battleship or, because now like I'm learning the difference between it wasn't a carrier. It didn't have a flight line, but it was huge. In my opinion, it was huge, like a huge ship. So we're getting toured around. Obviously, I'm not listening to what the recruiters and those guys are saying. I'm just like following around this girl And I do remember them showing us like the barracks, kind of like where you sleep, right? Fast forward to like a month later, same girl, she's like, hey, the Air Force guy is going to take us on a tour of the Air Force base. So again, I'm kind of, he said, invite your friends. So like, again, I'm following behind her. There's always a girl involved.
Of course.
And no matter
Yeah.
what you do in life, there's always a female, there's always a woman. So, or a love interest, right? Like if it was a movie. So now I'm following behind this girl. So now we go to the Air Force base and we get a tour of the whole base. And now we're touring the dormitory. So when we open the door, I see the room. I'm like, hey, like, who do you share this with? Like, where's the bunk bed?
Right.
He's like, oh, no, there's no bunk bed. This is this is for you. I was like, so what do you share? He's like, oh, you share. It's like a suite. So you share like this particular room, there was like a little kitchenette area with like a little table, refrigerator, and you share that with the guy next to you. Like, dude, like, okay. So mind you, at no point was I going to join the military at this particular time. Just being exposed to these two different things, it just shows you what resonates with you. So, I'm working for a maintenance company in Midtown Manhattan where I would strip and wax floors with like a machine, So I would work 11 at night to 7 in the morning. So vacuuming, wiping down windows and all those kind of things, stripping and waxing floors by myself. Then in the morning, this same building had like a gym in the basement. It was like a sub-level. It was like a huge gym. So I was a lifeguard. So I go down after my shift is over. So I go downstairs, I take the elevator
Mm-hmm.
down, and now I'm checking in at the front desk. You got to picture it, man. It's like, do you know who Rosie Perez is?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So picture like a young Rosie Perez. Is not her, but it was like just the accent. So it's a Puerto Rican girl with the accent, the big earrings. She's chewing gum. She's making bubbles. Super rude, right? Like, so I go down there to check in for my shift. She's basically like, she's chewing the gum, popping the bubbles. She's clicking. She's like, you're not on it. And she has like, her nails are all done. Mm-hmm. Typical Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx, probably, or Brooklyn, who knows. And she's basically like, you're not on the schedule. Kick rocks. Like, so I'm like, man, like, I knew I was on the schedule. I'm like, all right, screw it. I'm not on the schedule. They made a mistake. I'll just head home early, right? At the time I was living in Brooklyn. So I go out, I get a coffee, and I get do you remember what a corn muffin?
Yeah, I remember those, yeah.
So for those listening, a corn muffin is exactly that. It's a corn muffin. They heat it up on a hot grill. They put some butter and jelly on it with your coffee and go.
Right.
So I'm in Times Square. I go down to catch the train. Now it's a little later. It's probably like closer to like 9. I run into this girl that I used to go to night school with on the train platform. So I start chatting with her. I'm like, hey, like where have you been? Like, I haven't seen you. She's out of an extensive conversation of roughly like 30 minutes or so. We're waiting for the train. I let a few trains go by, because we were having this conversation. All I got from the conversation was that she was in the Air Force. She was doing public affairs for the Air Force. She was living in Japan doing public affairs, and that she was going to school for free. Those were like the main things that I heard, right? I didn't understand what public affairs meant. I didn't understand the whole Air Force thing. The whole Japan, I live in Japan, that was mind blown, right? I was like, who lives in Japan? So she digs in her purse and she pulls out this card. It's like all bent up. She's like, hey, like, this is the recruiter's info. You should go talk to him. So I look at it. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I'm just going to go here now. So I just went straight to Flatbush, out to Brooklyn. I go, and on Flatbush Avenue, there's a bunch of storefronts. And like the Navy had one, the Army, the Marines, right? So the only one that was open at this time in the morning was the Army. So I go walking down the street. There's a guy in an Army uniform. He's leaning on like a Honda Accord with like these 18-inch chrome rims. the top part of his uniform, he doesn't have it on. He's leaning on it. He's smoking a Newport. So he sees me walking down. He's like, "What's up, baby? What's up? You ready to do this? You ready to do this?" I'm like looking at him like, "What?" I'm like, "Nah, man, I'm looking for the Air Force." So the gate is down. So like the storefront for the Air Force is down. He's like, "Oh, they're closed. They closed, baby. They're not coming back." I'm like, "What?" Like something's not adding up. So I go back to the corner. I sit in this restaurant. I get some food. I go back. Like an hour later, I go back. Now the Air Force gate is up. So I go in there. Air Force guy, remember, it's 99. Remember, they didn't make gold that year. So he looks super flustered, right? He's like, so I walk in and he's basically like, "Do you have an appointment? Like who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, like so-and-so, gave me this card. He doesn't know who I'm talking about." So he's like, he's basically ready to like tell me to get out the office.
Right.
He's like, "You know what?" He's like, "Sit down." And he goes in and he pulls out like a baker's clock, like for like baking, like
the timer. Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm going to give you 30 minutes of my time." And he puts it on 30 and it's like ticking away. So now me and him start talking. Sure enough, the timer goes off. He's like, "Listen, I got some other stuff I got to do, but this is what it sounds like." And he's like, "It sounds like you want to get out of Brooklyn. You want to do some traveling and you want to go to school, but you don't want to take out any loans. Does that sound right?" I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." He's like, "I can help you." And that's how the whole thing like kind of like started. A few days later, I go down to the MEPS. I go take the ASVAB. I go do my medical stuff. I pass all that good stuff. And he calls me like 3 weeks later. He's like, "Listen, I got good and bad news for you." He's like, "Which ones do you want?" I was like, "Just whatever, give it to me." He's like, "Well, good news is that you're going to leave to basic training in a month. Bad news is that you're going to leave without a job. Ultimately, you're going to go on an open contract.
Right.
When you get down to basic training, you're going to get a chance to do another job counseling session." I was like, I had nothing holding me back. I'm gone. That's how I end up joining the Air Force.
Yeah.
That was the long version of it. Yeah.
No, and I tell you what, it's crazy. We hate you guys, and not because we hate you guys. We hate you guys. I'll tell you the main reason. Every branch knows we always poke fun of the Air Force because for some reason you guys always get the best of the best stuff, and we're sitting here like, "Yo, how do you get that, man?" Yeah. I remember when I was stationed in Pensacola, when I went to flight school in Pensacola. So if you're in aviation, everyone goes to Pensacola. Like you guys go there too. And I was sick when I found out that the Air Force got an extra stipend to be stationed on Pensacola because the barracks were below their living standards. I was like, "You got to be kidding me." And I thought that was like the best barracks I've ever been. I was like, "Yo, this is great." I was like, "Oh." It's so funny. But no, yeah, definitely. And I tell you what, it's interesting how that guy could have easily swayed you if you weren't that persistent, like, "Yeah, you know what, I'm going back to the Air Force recruiter." But you knew, like, you want to do that. So it's just interesting how, like, timing and, like, circumstance really plays a part in what we do.
Or what if he would have just been like, "Nah, man, you got to come back later."
Right,
like,
right.
I probably wouldn't have come back later.
Right, exactly.
Or maybe I would have went and spoke to the Army guy. Who knows, right? I have no clue, But I'll tell you what, like, what kept me in the Air Force, though, which is, I think, is, like, just as important as to what got me into the Air Force. I had a hard time, man. I had an extremely hard time because you got to understand. So I'm 21 years old. I've been on my own since I was 14, right? Literally on my own since I was 14. Walked out of my mother's apartment in the projects at the age of 14 and decided that I would not ever come back. It was like cold January or February day. And I was just, so at the time I didn't know this, but my mom was, she suffered from like bipolar. She was bipolar. All I ever knew was that my mom could flash on any, and what I mean flash, like she can spaz out, right?
Randomly,
she can have an episode, right? And growing up, you just laugh it off like, she's a live wire. Like she can blow up at any second now. Just watch what you say around her. But fast forward, what we didn't understand was that this was a mental illness that that runs in my family. And even like my grandmother was never diagnosed with being bipolar. But if you sit back and hear the stories, you're like, oh man, like maybe she was bipolar. Ultimately, my mom would just fly off the handle. I would get kicked out of the house and I would have to like couch surf with my friends or family. And that went on for years. Like that went on from the age of 5 or 6 years old all the way through the age of 14.
Yeah.
And when I got to 14, this one particular day, she kicked me out, and I just said to myself, today's the day, like I never go back. I break the cycle today. And I ended up renting a room at a halfway house. I did that for like a few weeks, and then ultimately I ended up finding like another place where I could rent out a room, and I would pay weekly. I was like 14 years old. The crazy thing is the place where I stayed the longest was it was my high school girlfriend's uncle, and he owned the building. And in the building, in the basement, he framed out 4 rooms. Like, dude, literally just framed out these rooms. No kitchen, no none of that. There was a drop sink in the middle of this area. That's where I would brush my teeth, and there was a concrete shower built out, like a shower you would see in Puerto Rico,
right.
Like small concrete, just literally just like a pipe coming out of the, and dude, that's where I lived. I lived there for like almost a year. So I had my room. The guy next to me was a taxi driver. The guy next to him was in a merengue band, and he was gone. Like, he was traveling with his band. And then the guy next to him had just been released from prison, and he was at Phoenix House. You familiar with Phoenix House?
Yeah.
It's like a counseling, it's transition. So he actually was a counselor, like a drug counselor at Phoenix House. But he had just been released from prison, I want to say maybe 6 months, something like that. So the taxi driver and the merengue guy, they were never around. So the only guy that was really around when I would get home from, because I worked like 3 jobs, was the guy from Phoenix House. So oddly enough, we would spend, maybe 20, 30 minutes in the night, he's brushing his teeth, I brush my teeth, and he would just kind of like, believe it or not, he was a mentor. You know what I mean? Like older guy trying to get his life back on track. I'm a young guy. I'm like the opposite end of the spectrum on my own, renting out this room. And all I could ever really gather from like the stuff that he would pass down to me was like, you got to finish school. You got to finish high school. Cause I was teetering in between getting my GED, because it seemed like it would just be easier for me to get the GED because I was working so much. And he's like, no. Get the high school diploma, which I'm glad that I listened, because although it was hard, that was beneficial in me being able to join the military, right? Because at that time, to come into the Air Force with a GED, I would have had to have the equivalent of like 60 college credits in order to come in with the high school diploma, which obviously I didn't have at the time. But yeah, man, it was crazy, man.
No, yeah, and I'm sure that was hard for you, and looking back now, it's like, that was so long ago, it's almost like a distant memory, like, especially how you're living now, it's like almost like a distant memory.
Oh, man, like huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Like I remember, because what a lot of folks don't realize is that, and, I don't share this with that many people, but I guess whoever's going to listen to this will hear it. But there was like a lot of, we were transient. We didn't have a lot of money. We were always back. We were in and out of shelters and that kind of thing. And then finally we got this apartment in the projects, Howard Projects in Brownsville in the mid 90s, which was, I can't even tell you how crazy that was, dude. That was an experience. That was a huge experience, just growing up in that environment. And that's all you know. That's all you know, because, you're only as good as you know. So whatever you're being exposed to, that's really, where it starts, So what's funny though is a buddy of mine, He's the one that got me a job doing maintenance in Manhattan. So the first job that I had doing maintenance was all the way in Harlem. So we would take the train from Brooklyn to Harlem. So our job, we would have to be there at 6 p.m. and it was like a office building. That's where I learned how to use the stripper machine. That's where I learned all these things. And then eventually I end up getting the other job in Midtown, which full circle, I go back downstairs. I'm not on the schedule. I end up joining the Air Force. It's wild, dude.
No, definitely. And like I said, that's part of the journey. You know, it's like I try to use that as not just a talking point, but let students know, like, we all have some journey we went through. Some struggled more than others. You know, my mom was a single mom too, and an immigrant. So not only is there a language barrier, there's also like the resources and finances to do certain things. You know, I'm my mom's only child, but my father, I have sisters on my father's side. So, you know, I always think about that. You know, like they
met here. Your mom and dad met in the States.
Yeah. They met in the States. Yeah, so
really?
They actually met at Job Corps. So that's when my parents met at Job Corps. Yeah. And then that's how they met. So, you know, for me, you know, I always think about, you know, growing up of, you know, see parents, you know, doing XYZ, or, you know, your friends are able to go here and go there. You can't go there. You know, they have cars. You don't have a car. You have to catch public transportation, all these things. And sometimes you can use that as a motivation to like make your life better, you know, and it can be demoralizing when you feel like all hope is gone. You know, you have some wild circumstances that are beyond your control and you can't do anything about it. But, you know, I have to think about the people who took that adversity and use it as a weapon, as a tool to light a fire under them to make sure they do better. Because the way I am now in my life is I try not to dwell on the excuses. Like, something's always going to happen. Like, I can't be like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? I just had to figure out why it's happening and then make sure I do the proper steps to make sure it doesn't continue or fix my situation. Because I look at it like no one's coming to save you, especially like us as men. Like, no one's coming to save us. Like, if we're homeless, like, I was thinking about even with your family, right? God forbid if something happens and you guys lose a house, no one's gonna go to your wife and be like, "How come you guys lost the house?" They're gonna go right to you.
Yep.
And be like, "Mach, how do you let this happen to your family? How you let this house go away? How come you didn't pay the mortgage or whatever?" So no one's coming to save us. So we kind of have to make sure that we take our bad circumstances and don't let them paralyze us, but, you know, use that as motivation to make sure that we're doing better for us and our families.
Man, that's a really good point. Yeah, like no one's coming, man. Like,
right, no one's coming. That's
you have to figure this one out, you know?
And to your point, that's where the mentors come in. So I believe we should all have some kind of mentorship, whether it's a family member, it could be a captain, could be first sergeant, whoever you look up to.
Yep.
That person, and they have insight, you know? I think we live in a world where we believe the older generation has nothing to beneficial to give us, and then we also believe the young people don't know what they're doing. But I believe two things can be true at the same time. There's a lot of things I learned from my son. My son just turned 20. There's a lot of things I learned from him that I never would have known otherwise, because he's a little bit younger. But then also I could speak to him from an older man and say, "Hey man, don't do this," or "This is not a good idea because I did it."
Yep.
And it wasn't that favorable. But also I had to be a realist, right? Like, sometimes kids are going to make mistakes. They're going to do things. I remember my son was probably like 5 at the time. He was like 4 or 5. And I never forget the story. He was like building Legos. He was always good at Legos, but he was building the Legos. And I saw he was doing it wrong. Like, in my head, I'm like, yo, he's messing this up. He's a kid, whatever. But he kept trying to figure out how he's doing it wrong. And I was like, "Hey, Aunt." His name was Anthony, but I call him Aunt. I was like, "Hey, Aunt." I was like, "You know, you're doing it wrong, man. You got to do X, Y, Z." Mind you, this is like a 4-year-old. He looked at me. He was like, "Dad, I got to make my own mistakes." He went right back to like I was like,
dropping gems.
I was like, "What?" It's in my head. I'm like, did he just? I was like, he's right. He has to make his own mistakes. And even he knew, like, yeah, I might be doing this wrong, but like, I have to figure this out. As a little boy, he realized he had to figure out this problem because, you know, I can't help him. I mean, I could help him, but it'll be more beneficial to him to kind of get it on his own. So I think that's where we have to realize, like, yes, things happen. We have unforeseen circumstances. Some people have it really hard. Some people had to struggle as a kid, they had to struggle finding their way. Maybe they didn't have both their parents, they didn't have the money. I joke about that with my mom. Like I joke about, like, I remember, like, there was times where, like, my mom didn't eat so I could eat.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I always think about that, and then now, like, my mom can eat anywhere she wants to eat for the most part, so it is humbling, and we have to remember, just because we grew up a certain way doesn't mean that's it for us. Like, there is an escape, whether it's military, whether it's, you're artists, whether, you play a sport, whether you're really smart. I remember back in the day, they used to make fun of you for, like, being intelligent, right? Like, oh, this guy's reading books.
Yeah.
This nerd reading books.
Right. Yeah.
Now, being a nerd is, like, cool. It's cool to wear glasses. It's cool to read. It's cool to be into tech, and Legos and build stuff. So we can't let other people and, like, other things kind of stop us from, like, doing what we have to do. And I think the mentorship is a big key. Like, I wish I got my mentors. I'm grateful for all the mentors I had, whether it's military, whether it's Rutgers, whether it's just in my life in general. My only regret is I wish I had those mentors early on in my life.
Mm-hmm. When I first joined the Air Force, my tech school was so short. So for those listening who are not familiar with tech school is, in the military, in the Air Force, like, you'll go to basic training, and it's changed. I think when I went through, it was like 6 or 7 weeks. It went up to like 8. It changes. But ultimately, when you're done with basic training, you go off to tech school to learn your job before you go to your first operational base. My tech school was only 6 weeks long. So we were called Pop-Tarts because we were just up and out quick. So within a matter of 6 months, less than 6 months, I go from living in Brooklyn, living in a shelter, to all of a sudden, now I'm in the Air Force and I'm done with all my training, and I just get to my first base in Charleston, South Carolina. So when I get there, my transition is hard, man, because I went from Brooklyn, New York, to now all of a sudden Charleston, South Carolina. Oh, and guess what? You're in the military. Yeah. It's a lot to kind of like take in all at one time. When I reflect back on the mentors, there was a guy that really, they were calling him, and I've mentioned it before on here, but they were calling him like Master Sergeant Rhodey. And what that really meant was retired on active duty, because he was like 6 months out from getting out.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But he took the time prior to him fully, transitioning. He took the time to speak to me every day for about 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes even a little longer. So one of the key things that I got from him early on was, what time do you show up for work, right? Or what time does your day start? Oh, my day starts at 7:30. No, your day starts at 7. You need to be here at 7. Go through your emails, this, that, and the other. You need to be ready to go at 7:30. Okay. What time do you get off of work? Oh, I get off at 4:30. No, you get off at 4:45. No matter what, you don't leave until 4:45. Okay. Do you know how to make a pot of coffee? No. Learn how to make a pot of coffee. That's the first thing you do when you get into the office. You make a pot of coffee. I'm like, okay. And then the last thing was like, if there's nothing else going on, pick up a broom. So I started doing exactly. So like ultimately, what I didn't realize what was happening was the narrative. I start painting this narrative for myself, right? Shows up early, leaves late, he's a doer, right? Team player, that kind of thing. And slowly things just start working out in my favor, right? The opportunities start to present themselves, and things start to develop. Before you know it, a year has gone by, a year and a half has gone by, and now that transition part of actually being in the military was not that difficult, was not that hard. So I'm always grateful. And there's a lot of other things that came out of those mentoring sessions, like the importance of just getting into real estate, and like not getting into a vehicle with a high APR, which is what instinctively I was gonna end up doing.
I think we all end up doing that to some degree,
Yeah.
right? This
25%
APR, some like charger or something.
Criminal,
Yeah.
absolute criminal that even exists, but yeah, man. But things start slowly turning themselves around, and before you know it, man, I'm getting things done, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and because it was honestly, Dennis, like I really thought that I was gonna get booted out of the military. I didn't think I was gonna last a year. It was just like, and again, there's some other things that go in line with that, but like, just to give you some, context, like my very first day showing up to my first base, I'm in my service dress, my supervisor, how we were saying, like, take the good and the bad from folks or whatever, my immediate supervisor was like, what are you doing here? She's like, you guys normally join the Army. Yeah.
What do you mean you guys?
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, and I'm so like I'm not stupid, but I'm smart enough to know, like, don't start no shit. You just got here.
Yeah.
Don't rock the boat, right? So, but that was the first thing that was said to me. That was the very first thing that was said to me on my first day. What are you doing here? You guys normally join the Army. And the battle started from there, dude. The battle of of finding your worth, being resilient, moving forward, and not letting the naysayers bring you down. You know what I mean? Yeah, man, it was wild.
No, and that's crazy because I think we all have a story like that, and it's interesting to see how some things change, but some things don't change.
Mm-hmm.
And that even goes into like stereotypes, right? It's like there's going to be that person who assumes that you don't belong just because you look differently,
mm-hmm.
or you don't meet some criteria. Like, oh, how did this guy get in here? Wait a minute, I had to go through school and do X, Y, Z, and this guy's in here, like this guy, So to your point, it's like those naysayers, they're always going to be there, whether it's early on in your career or later on when you transition and do something else. So I just try to be mindful of what's said to me. That way, if it happens again, I'm like, okay, like
mm-hmm.
This is what we're doing. All right, cool, bet.
You know what's really interesting though, Dennis, is like, so I just retired, right? And at my retirement ceremony, part of the presiding officer's speech is they're speaking to the folks in attendance, like your family and fellow service members, commanders. They're giving these folks a snapshot of your career. So they start in the beginning, they work to the middle, and then they get to the end of your career. But it's a ceremony, so it can't go that long, right? Like, and people's attention span is very little. So one of the things that I'm not sure if I mentioned or not, but throughout the whole 10 or 15 minutes of someone describing my career, right? Describing it from the very beginning to how I completed, they're articulating the highs. But at no point are we focusing on the lows. So out of 24 years, it hasn't been like this the whole time, right? It's been like this, And I try to tell folks all the time is like, if you're in a bad spot, because we've all been there. If you're in a bad spot, I think it's important to understand that it's just a season. It's going to pass, but you have to continue. You have to stay the course. And one of the things that you have control over is your attitude. It's your attitude. When you put on your uniform and you step out of the door for that day of service or that day of work, whatever you want to call it, the one thing that you control is your attitude. So if you want to show up to the job in a bad mood or because things are maybe not going in your direction or how you would hope they would go, at least your attitude you're in control over. So you could show up with a positive attitude. It might not be easy, but that's one thing that you have control over. You know what I mean? So
No, absolutely. And to your point, even with the uniform, I also say too, when we put the uniform on, we're not just representing us, we're representing the branch, right? So when you wear that uniform, you're an airman, you're representing the Air Force. Say, then I gotta look at it like, oh, well, this Puerto Rican guy said something. No, you're like, oh, this airman said something
yep.
on behalf of the Air Force.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you're representing just it's bigger than yourself.
Mm-hmm. You know, like on our uniforms, right? Your name normally your name's on your right side, and your service is over your heart, right? Is on your left side. So I had a supervisor that used to tell me, he's like, hey, who do you work for? Do you work for Ortiz or do you work for us? U.S. Air Force.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Who do you work for? Today, who are you working for? And it was always like, I work for us. You know?
Wow. Yeah. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, man, just trying to, it's funny when you reflect back on those days and sometimes, you know, when I'm speaking to like one of my younger troops and they're going through like something devastating is going on, you know, it's when you have an extensive career with all of these ups and downs, you can wholeheartedly speak to these younger folks and tell them, listen, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to make it through this. This is a season. This is going to pass. But if you didn't have any kind of a background or experience in adversity or being challenged, and yet here you are telling this person, yeah, everything's going to be okay, but you've never experienced anything difficult in your career, it doesn't add up. You know what I mean?
No, that matters. They say you can test a person's character by 3 things: when you give them money, when you give them power, or when they're scared or fear, right? So when you give someone money, it just kind of enhances what they already are. If you're a jerk making $30K, you're gonna be a mega jerk making $300K. It's not gonna be, you're not gonna be nicer about it, right? Same thing with power. Like if you're a jerk without any power, what do you think is gonna happen when you give that person power? They're gonna be worse. And the fear, scared one that's how you could tell if someone's a coward or not, right? When something scary happens or an emergency happens, do they fold or do they spring into action? And that's where our population comes in, right? Like, they say like, what, 2% of the people join the military? Because if it was easy, everyone would do it.
It might be even less than that.
It might be less than that, right?
It might be less than that, yeah.
Not everyone joins the military. There's a reason for that, right? A lot of training, a lot of studying, a lot of hours staying up, right? Time away from your family, time away from your home. All these things that most people don't want to sign up for. Like, who wants to sign up for training for 10 plus weeks out the year? No one. Who wants to sign up for not seeing your family 6 or 7 months out the year? No one wants to sign up for that. Who wants to sign up for possibly being in danger and or dying to protect your country? Most people don't want to do that. So when you trim it down, there's a small population of us who actually answer the call like, you know what? This is something bigger than me. Because I don't care what branch you're in, whether it's Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, Marines. Every service member who joins the military, in the back of their head, they know that there is a chance they could die.
Yeah.
In any capacity, whether it's on base, whether it's training, you could be a yeoman or pushing pencils in personnel. We're all trained and qualified to fire a weapon for a specific reason, in case the base gets attacked or something happens. So we have to realize that even though we're not picking the most dangerous job, we may not be picking security forces or tier 1 or operator. You know, we might be maintenance, but guess what? Everyone in maintenance knows how to fire a weapon, and that's for a reason. So not a lot of people aren't signing up to be like, okay, I want to do this dangerous thing and put my life at risk. So the ones who do that, we have a certain thing about us that kind of, that switch, like where, yeah, we might be scared, but we're still going to do what we have to do in spite of us being scared. And I think that's the difference between us and the regular civilians, where it's not about being scared. It's about doing what you're supposed to do in lieu of you being scared or terrified. And that's where the honor, courage, and commitment comes in, right?
Dennis, before I forget, I really want to make sure that what you're current position is at the moment at Rutgers, that folks that are hearing this have a full understanding of what exactly your organization does. Can you just tap on that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, so I work at Rutgers University, but specifically for the Office of Veteran and Military Programs and Services. Our main job is to assist all of our military-affiliated students who are attending university. So whether it's active duty, a dependent, National Guard, reservists, any student who's military affiliated and is using any kind of like GI Bill benefits or any kind of National Guard benefits, they all go through our office. And the reason for that is to make sure that they have a smooth transition from going from military to civilian, and that they're not missing out on any benefits or resources that are available to them at the university.
Oh, wow. Okay. Man, that must keep you busy.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. So as a whole, Rutgers University has about 2,000 military affiliated students between all three of the campuses.
Wow.
So Newark, Camden, New Brunswick. I believe Camden has around 400 military. Newark has around 600, and New Brunswick, which is my campus, we have the most. We have around like 1,000.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and it does get challenging because their age ranges from 24 to 64, depending on the student. So, we have some students who just got out the military. They've been in 20 years. And they're like, hey, I want to go to school. Some of these guys and gals have been in school in 20 plus years, so we kind of help them with their transition. We have also students who are dependents. Maybe their parent is still in the military and they're using their parent's GI Bill, and we just help them navigate the whole process of, what their benefits are and what they can and can't use.
Wow.
And then also on top of that, we have different resources at the university to assist our veteran and military students with any type of disability, or, they have questions about a specific department. So it's kind of like an all-in-one stop shop, but we really don't like to call it that because, yes, it's like an all-in-one stop shop, but also if we can't facilitate what you need, we have different points of contact in each department to assist with us to help the students.
Got it. Wow. And how does your radio station fall in line with what you're doing?
So I have my own radio show at Rutgers University, Rutgers Radio, called The Veterans Corner, where we discuss military-affiliated issues and topics that surround the campus or surround our community. So it's not limited to just Rutgers stuff. It could be, for example, someone like you who's military and has our own podcast. So the real niche is our military-affiliated population in our area and what they're doing in their community. So it just happens to showcase it. So a lot of it is or Rutgers alum who just happen to be military, but it also could be someone like you who has their own podcast, or maybe someone who's military who is a realtor now, or maybe someone who was their father was military and they used their GI Bill and now they're a doctor and now they work at the VA. So it's just a different slew of military affiliated people and their contributions to our community.
That's great. That's how long have you had the radio station?
So I've had it. This is my 4th year having it. So,
wow.
Yeah, I was the co-host up until last year. So up until last year, I was only the co-host of the show. But the host, Don Busney, he's a retired Marine Corps officer. He retired last year. So once he retired, to your point, I had to step up and take over the show.
The natural order.
Right, the natural order things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you're right. Everything does come full circle. So I never saw myself as being a host. I always thought, I'll just be the co-host and do whatever. But, to your point, when Don retired, I'm the next logical choice because they're not going to find someone else to do it.
Right.
And I'm already there.
Right, exactly, yeah. Especially if you have a rhythm and you know how was that. Yeah, no, for sure. Wow, that's pretty. What's coming up in this school year that you guys are planning for, your organization?
So we have a whole bunch of events that we're doing. We have it's a mixture of professional development and recreation. So whether it's a VA workshop where we have people from the VA actually come into our office and give like free sessions or seminars, whether it's someone who helps with resumes, whether it's relaxation tips for taking a test, resources available at the university. So basically, we like to showcase all available resources that are available to the university and or the surrounding community to the students who may not necessarily be familiar with it. Like 2 weeks ago, we had someone coming from the VA to talk about how to apply for a VA loan, what the criteria is, what are the things you need. Some of these things we really don't learn when you get out the military. 'Cause
Yeah.
we're thinking, oh, we'll just get out and do whatever. But these resources are available to us, and there's, it's also a way for us to save money. Like the VA loan, for people who aren't aware, the VA loan is a godsend to most of our population, because if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be able to get a house otherwise without that, so.
Yeah, my first home was purchased with the VA loan.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Man, that's wild. This is what I want to ask you. In terms of like fulfillment, knowing that you have access to roughly 1,000 folks at your one campus, being able to provide service and help these folks get where it is they're trying to get to, that's got to feel good, right?
No, it does feel good. And I tell you what, it sounds corny, but it does feel good, because I believe I'm giving back. And I always told myself, I remember, and it's kind of back to the military, right? It's like, I remember when I was that new person who was green, super bug-eyed, G.I. Joe, gung-ho, and I didn't know anything. And I wish there was somebody like me that helped me back in the day. So what I try to do is I try to make sure that all the students I come across who come through our office, I give them the same help I wish somebody would have gave me when I first got out the military, not knowing anything, trying to navigate Google and find this person and use my GI Bill and try to go to school, all this information that I missed out on that I didn't know. So, and you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't have the question, you can't ask. And no one's going to volunteer and say, hey, by the way, you should be doing X, Y, Z unless you ask. So I use this as a way to kind of give back to my community, but also help the younger people and the people like me who are trying to start over and start their second chapter of their life after the military and make sure they're successful.
Man, I think for a lot of us with military experience and commitment to service, when we transition, I think instinctively we want to find positions where we feel like we're giving back, or where there's like a clear way to feel fulfilled, if that makes any sense.
No, definitely. And I tell you what, I was talking about this to one of my coworkers. I was like, if you think about it, this is no different than what I was doing at my last command, right? My last command, I had new sailors coming in. Hey, do this, don't do that. This is what you got to do. This is what's available to you. I'm just out of college now. New people come in. Hey, do this, don't do that. This is what you can do. If you have any questions, let me know. So I'm essentially doing the same thing I was doing in the military, just on the civilian side. So I think that's why it feels so comfortable for me too. It's more of what I already know and what I've been doing already.
Wow, man! Listen, we're lucky to have you. Our community is lucky to have you.
I appreciate it.
You know what I mean?
Appreciate
Transitioning young men and women, leaving the service, trying to figure out what the next chapter is going to be in their life. To have someone like yourself with such good experience, right? To kind of like be the middle part for someone, or not even the middle part, just to be
I'll say like a bridge.
The bridge, right? To help folks transition. And again, we're lucky to have you.
I appreciate it.
And I say that as a community, we're lucky to have you and folks like you that are committed to the well-being of our transitioning service members. Is there anything else you want to tap on that I might have missed?
I would just say I would like to give some advice to any service members and or family who may be listening. We come from a culture of, tough it out, don't be the weakest link. In the height of mental health and, us losing people unnecessarily to like suicide and things like that, let's just make sure that we ask for the help when we need it. We appreciate the service. We understand where you come from. We have to also focus on ourselves and make sure that we're doing our due diligence for ourselves and for our families. If you need the help, it's okay. If you're feeling sad, it's okay. If you need to go see a therapist, that's also okay. If you have to get a hobby to keep you interested or whatever you need to do to protect your mental health and wealth, by all means, take care of it, and don't neglect it. And don't think that you'll be shamed for saying that, you don't feel well, whether it's physically or mentally. So I just think about all the unnecessarily people we lost just because, they didn't want to ask for help because they're worried about being shamed or, they're worried about they be perceived as weak. Like we have to get rid of that toxic mindset. Like us asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. 100%. For myself, I think I've been in unique positions where I have been an airman, I have been an NCO, I have been a senior NCO, and ultimately finishing out my career as a first sergeant, where you are the buck stops with you as a first sergeant, right? You have someone in your unit who's going through tough times or struggling mentally. It ultimately stops with you in terms of getting that person to the proper helping agency, right? And what I will say is there's tons of help out there. There's tons of help. But what the question that I like to ask folks is, why are folks not being helped? And I think sometimes it takes the person who's in need of this assistance to have trust and faith in their leadership to help them navigate. If you're if the folks in your unit do not have trust in you, you've lost, right? How do you get them to trust you? How do you get them to understand that you are going to be committed in whatever it is they have going on in their lives to get them on the right track, to get them better? But ultimately, if they don't trust you, when the environment changes and now it's a deployed environment, how do you expect for this person to come to you with any sort of issue if they don't trust you? So I think for those that are listening, if you're in a position of leadership and you do not have the full trust of the members of your unit, I think you need to do some reflection.
Absolutely. So, and I just want to add one more thing. Also, it's okay to be vulnerable with your junior enlisted. You'd be surprised how much they would open to you if you are relatable. You're not just the first sergeant who's just knife handing him every day because he's messing up. Let him know that, hey, guess what? I was an E3 too. I know it sounds far fetched, but I was you at one point, and you can show them that there is a different path. It's not just it's not a linear path of success. There's different avenues. You might hit a hurdle, you might hit a couple hurdles, but it's not how you start; it's how you finish.
Brother, well said, my man. I think we can leave it there. Dennis, Mr. Penny, as some will call you, thank you again. Much appreciated. Thank you for coming out to Spark.N.Stride, for being an early supporter of Spark.N.Stride. There is so much that you and I think offline we want to get into and give back to our community at the university level, as well as our community here within the tri-state area. So I look forward to us working together in the near future.
No, definitely. Mach, thank you for having me. Shout out to Spark.N.Stride for having me. I love the platform. You guys go follow him. Hopefully I'll be back on.
Absolutely.
And we're definitely going to be collabing on some stuff too for our community and also for our service members. So thank you guys for having me.
Brother, thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, man.
Stay sparked.
Heavy duty. It's Mach.